Hemshech Hayim Beis, Volume 1. We're at the beginning of discourse number 45, Sheftim, Tafresh Ayin Gimel, 100 years ago. And let me sum up the discussion we were at. We're in the middle of a fascinating discussion on Torah and souls and Neshamas, which itself is in context of the general theme of Ayin Beis, which is the interface. So as he's been explaining that the interface consists of two key powerful forces, two energies. One that represents the divine in existence, and one that relates to existence. What is called the transcendent Ir HaBligvul, infinite energy, and there's the immanent finite energy. The difference is explained. We look into our own flesh. You behold God mipsariach zalakah, that we have our faculties. Our faculties, each energy fits into its particular, tailored to its faculty. The power of vision in the eye, the power of hearing in the ears, power of intelligence in the brain, etc. And then we have the power of desire, Ratzon. Ratzon is an all-encompassing factor that affects all parts of the being, and it's not localized. But it's a force that affects existence. The same thing is the way God created existence. There's the Ratzon Hashem, which is God's desire. The desire for everything we see, everything that exists. That's an all-encompassing, more transcendent energy. It's not localized. It's not integrated. And then you have the particular energy that enters each part of existence. Daimim, the mineral world, is shaped a certain way. Shemeach, the vegetable world, the animal world, the human world. Another way of putting it, as we discussed, is God created the world. Bereshis bara Elokim, created heaven and earth. It encompasses everything. As Rashi and the commentaries all explain, that in the beginning everything was created like in a nucleus, like a seed. And then in each day it emerged. So it was a klal that came to a prat. And then, so Bereshis nami maimerhu. Bereshis is also one of the 10 utterances when we say 10. But Bereshis, you would have only a world that would be the overall. I want this building. I want this universe. But what do you want in the universe? Vayomer Elokim yehi ar. Let there be light. Let there be a heaven. Let there be vegetation. Heaven meaning splitting the upper waters from the lower waters. Let there be vegetation. Let there be luminaries in the celestial bodies in the heavens. Let there be animals, fish, creatures. Let there be a human being. And each of them, as the Shai Yuchad Muna explains, that those 10 break into many more that create the diversity of existence. So every piece of existence is energized by a particular tailored energy. It's not just God said, I want a world and pop. He could have done it that way. But He wants the distinctions because that's part of the plan, is dir b'tachteinim. So now what we really need to have is a joining of these two extremes, and that's how it works. The finite energy speaks to each particular part of creation on its terms. The infinite energy is informing us, is like you can call the source code of what the source is like. And the goal is for these two to join. So the Ir HaBligvul creates bittul in existence. When we focus on that, we realize the awesome infinite power of the divine that's beyond us. When we focus on the Ir HaGvul, the immanent, we're focusing on energy that we can relate to. It also brings a bittul, but it's also one that fits your existence. So it's not complete nullification of existence, it's a permeating. And you want both. You want yichud and bittul, so to speak. You want to unify with the divine, but you also want to be beyond, the divine is beyond us. You want that beyond to become within, so to speak. So then, explaining that, he began to explain that's the difference between Ovis and Matan Torah. Historically, these two stages, that's how it worked. And frankly, this is how it works also in each of our personal lives. The Ovis, the patriarchs, they prepared the world and they expanded the pipelines to align existence with the divine. And then comes Matan Torah and it introduces a Yichud Chadash, a new energy, a new divine energy that comes from another place, beyond existence. So in a way, in our personal lives, we begin first educating our children to just be mentioned, to simply be aligned with what we were created to be. As they develop and are prepared, basically once the stage is set, then you can be prepared to receive things that are even beyond existence. But first, existence has to be aligned to so-called its source, and then it can receive dimensions that are even beyond existence within existence. Like the classic example of the Tzimtzum with the student. First, the student has to learn ABC. First, the teacher has to conceal the ABC on our terms. Once you learn Aleph Beis, then you can start learning ideas till you reach the point where the teacher understood, and even new things that the teacher himself did not never even revealed. So he explained that length of it. Then he went to Matan Torah, starts being about what is the role of Torah. And now we're in the middle of that. Torah, he says, is also part of the interface. Torah too has two sides. Even though Torah in general, compared to the energy within existence, is already a chiddush, but Torah itself also has the two parts. One part, Chitzeni Torah, the outer dimension of Torah. One is the inner dimension. And he explains this by understanding the difference with the story with David HaMelech. David was admonished, was punished for calling the Torah my song. Zmiros hayalichu kecha. Your laws, your rules, your Torah was my song. What's wrong with that? Because David was Meshabeach, he was praising the Torah based on its value to him. When the true nature of the Torah is that Shashrim Lefanov, it's God's delights. It's like Amen. It's God's. It's the nurturee, the nurtured one of God, nurtured by God. So he explains these two dimensions in Torah is the Torah as it relates to us, as David recognized, in order to somewhat calm, in order to console himself from his challenges. He realized the whole world is dependent on one dikduk, one detail of Torah. So what are my troubles worth? He realized that my troubles are not anything compared to the Torah. And also that the Torah, Zmira comes from the word also Lazamir, to uproot the weeds, that to cut off the supply lines of the klippas, which we discussed. I don't want to go into the details. But what David missed was that the Torah is much more than that. The main Torah is that it's God's delights. And then, to understand that, the Rebbe Rashab continued and started discussing what that means. Discussing that God looks into the Torah and creates the world. That the Torah is the interface. God is beyond existence. Looks into the Torah, where the blueprint that he created, a blueprint that speaks about existence, and then he creates existence. This blueprint is made up of two components. It reflects God's will. So it has the Eir HaBligvul, that Hashashrim Lefanov, that's God's desires, God's delights. Etzloi, his personal, intimate delight, Torah. But then this Torah, as it relates, it's also the blueprint which creates. So it's facing both directions. Torah is God's expression, but it's also a blueprint for existence. So it's a perfect interface. As I just said, there's the outer and the inner Torah. The inner Torah reflects more the divine aspect in it. The outer Torah reflects more how the Torah creates. So he's explaining that also in the way we learn Torah, there's two steps. Initially, we begin learning Torah in order to awaken our soul. Soul is concealed in existence. Neshama, even though it's divine, comes down and gets concealed in this world. So he wrote the Zohar, the three bonds, the three tlas kishon, the three bonds, three knots. Israel, the souls, Raisa, Torah, and God. So the simple interpretation of this means that the souls need Torah. The Torah helps them connect to what God wants. So it awakens their neshama. So it's just for them. And that leads, he said, to another stage of learning Torah Lishma. Not for our benefit, not even to quench our thirst for spirituality that's awakened through davening, but it is it's Lishma L'Shem HaTorah, to bring godliness into the Torah. So that's the second level, the second kesha, that we bind Torah to God. And then he explained that even though this is a kesha, that happens below. That's why it's called a kesha. Kesha means a bond. The bond implies that two things are separate and you bind them together. Because both the souls, as they come down below, are separate and feel themselves separate from the source. So through Torah, they bind themselves. Torah also, as it comes down below, is only like the leaves, nevles, of wisdom of above. And through the souls studying Torah below, they bind Chochmah of Torah to that which is beyond wisdom. Nevertheless, by coming down below, this is kashrus, achieves something deeper and greater than the way the souls in the Torah were in their source. Achieves something far greater. What does it achieve? It achieves, as it brings Shechera Niva Nava, that the darkness below brings a beauty that they cannot have achieved above. It's the kaloyin, the word kala, the thirst and the aspiration that can only come when the soul comes down below. And he explained how this both connects the soul in a deeper way and reaches the etzem, the source, because the soul above is connected to its source, but it doesn't have necessarily the connection to the etzem in quite that way. Same thing compared to Torah, that's the souls. Both the love and awe are far deeper, as he explained, when it comes down below, because the love is deeper because of this passion. Kala is far deeper than sister, achesi. Achesi is a cool type of love. It's consistent, but it's cool, it's not passionate. Even Yira also, there's a bittul, Einay, there's the higher bittul that down below you realize that there's nothing but God. As opposed to the bittul of Eir, which only senses that it is nullified in the presence of the divine. And same thing the souls compared to Torah. In its root, the souls are rooted in the letters of Torah. Down below they access the aura of Torah, the energy of wisdom of Torah. And even higher than the wisdom because it comes with a yearning and a kala type of approach. And the same thing with Torah. The Torah above is rooted in the letters, either written or engraved letters. And down below, you reach the etzem. Down below, the etzem of Elokus is revealed in the Torah. That's not revealed up above. And now we continue on. Sheftim v'sheftim titin lecha, in discourse number 45, bottom of page 365. You shall appoint titin lecha. You shall appoint sheftim v'sheftim, judges and law enforcers. Tzedek tirdiv. You shall pursue tzedek, double tzedek, justice, kindness. Leman tichye v'yarashta. In order for you to live, v'yarashta, and for you to inherit. But tzarech lav mavi and based upon tzedek, we have to understand what is this double tzedek. She'emet tzedek tirdiv. You shall pursue tzedek twice. What's wrong with saying once? V'ach kachemer gamkein beis inyanim leman tichye v'yarashta. And afterwards, Yosef says, in order for you to live and inherit. What are the two things? Umashmoise inyan, who and it appears. It appears from this context, shall they base upon tzedek, through these two times of tzedek, you'll have the tichya and the yarashta, the living and the inheritance. What are these? We have to understand what are these two things. And that happens, and this comes through the double tzedek. Tzedek is sometimes justice. Tzedek can be from the word tzedakah, kindness, justice. And also, what is the connection between this and what it says earlier, that you shall appoint judges and law enforcers? Seemingly two separate things. To understand all this, we have to preface what we've learned earlier. We preface what we learned earlier, what was discussed earlier, Be'inyan Maimar Azer Tlas Kishin. Remember, the whole thing was the explanation of the Zohar, Tlas Kishin, the three bonds. This Kashrus Shaykh B'Shnei Dvarim Nivdalim. Hiskashus, binding something, is possible by two separate things. The bedavar echad k'may eira moyer, by one thing, like a light and like a source, a luminary, and its light, oyer, the light, and moyer, its source, the source of the luminary, she'er einu muhus acher mahamoyer, where the energy, the light, is not a separate personality, a separate entity from the source. Einu shaykhin hiskashus. It's not possible to say the word hiskashus. You're binding; they're bound together. Kim dveikus. There you say dveikus. Dveikus means two things that are like one and united. Dveikus dovuk. I mean, dovuk means to cleave, to be cleaved. That's what you say there. That's dveikus. It's a constant connection. Hiskashus implies two separate things that you bind together. It's like making a knot, tying two things together. You wouldn't say light and its source are tied together. You don't tie them together. They are together. They're dovuk. They're constantly connected. Only with two separate things, that's where you can say hiskashus. And what was explained? How does that work with neshamas and Torah? Hainu. This means b'neshamas Yisrael v'Torah. They're both in the souls of Israel and Torah. That the soul, being a separate identity, a separate personality, as it comes below, there you can say it binds itself and connects itself b'Torah and Torah. And the same thing you can say Torah compared to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Why? Because the naveless chachma shel ma'ala Torah. Because the Torah, as it descends below, is not just like light and its source. It's called naveless, the leaves or the like fallings, the droppings of wisdom above are Torah. So Torah is a drop. When something drops off a tree, a leaf off a tree or a fruit off a tree, it's no longer bound there. So though it still retains its divine personality, but there's a disconnect, so to speak, to some extent. As he said, disconnect is that Torah is chachma, wisdom, and the Torah in its source is God, is beyond wisdom. So the point is that Torah below can become trapped in the world of wisdom, where you can study it, let's say, just an academic way. It's wisdom. We have to connect it to the Noisen Torah, to connect it to the giver of Torah, which that requires a particular action. So that's why Shaykhin Hiskashus. So Torah compared to God, that's where you can say the word Hiskashus. Thus explaining the Zohar's term Klas Kishrin. The emphasis that why even that one, that little, called the three bonds, three knots. And was explained to be Hiskashus. She has Furthermore, it was explained that through connecting something below, it has an advantage even compared to the unity that was there preceding before it descended. Souls above are connected to Torah, as we know that each soul is connected to a letter in the Torah. However, there it's just connected to the letters of Torah. Think of it like fruits on a tree. Every soul is connected to its letter in Torah. Ulamata, and below, where the soul ostensibly gets disconnected. Or let's put it this way, on a conscious level, the soul is not aware of its connection. When the soul below learns Torah, the connection to Torah is with Chachma Shabbatayr, not just the letter. The wisdom within the letters. And even further more. And even more than the wisdom, the Er Chodesh, the new energy that's drawn down from the core Ein Sof, from Atzmus Ein Sof in Torah. Which, as he said, comes from the Kala part, from the yearning. So by learning Torah with that passion that only below you have, you draw down this new energy. Yeah. Well, but Derech Klal, he says in the parentheses, who inyan beze fani his kashas in Shamas Yisrael b'Torah. And in general, these are the two types of bonding of souls in Torah. Now, what does this parenthesis mean? It can mean a few things. But Pashtus, most apparent, seemingly what it means is what he was saying in the previous chapter. You see, it says that when the soul's connected to Torah, there's kiloyin ba'atzmus ein sof. There's a kiloyin, there's a being dissolved in, because like a kala, the yearning, the thirst. So it gets absorbed in the divine. That's one aspect in the hiskashrus. And the second is the Gili Er Chodesh HaBetera. That's what apparently is referring to the two things. But I'm not positive, because you could also say at the end of the last chapter, he said, through the Iskashas, the souls in Torah, but Beis HaYifanim Hanal. And the two Ifanim of Iskashus he spoke was one where you do it for your purposes, which is your benefit. What he called in the beginning of chapter 176, Mikora. Ki Ovid ina shadaita denavsha Ovid. A person begins by doing it for his own purpose, which is to connect his soul to Torah. I would say that's definitely more pshat. And the second is Shema Torah, L'shma, in order to draw down the energy in Torah. But we discussed that these two things relate to the two elements also of Kiloyin, which is more like davening. The thirst that's created, the hunger, the passion. Because when he speaks about the learning Torah, he also says that when it's through Hakdamas Aved B'chinas Kala, Mamshichim Er Chadash. So I would say that these two things are connected to these two things. In other words, there's we learning Torah in order to connect to the divine. We are asleep. We're spiritually asleep. Like he spoke right in the morning when you wake up. Our divine faculties, the faculties of the divine soul are numb or dormant, however you want to call it. And Torah awakens it, warms them up. It's like a warm-up. It's like it ignites them, so to speak. Then comes a davening which creates a passionate yearning. And then comes the Torah that integrates it and returns it back into Shuv, internalizes it, quenches the thirst and internalizes it. So it appears to me that these two things, number one, there's the two elements of learning Torah. The simple thing, you learn Torah in order to awaken your soul. So it's for your purposes. It's not for the Torah, it's for you. It's for your nefesh. To bring godliness into the world. So that's Iskashus too. Yeah. That's also connection. That's also binding yourself to Torah. It's also part of the bind. And he even called it, he said that's the Pirush HaPoshet in Iskashra. Simple interpretation that Israel binds itself to Torah, through that they bind themselves to God. And then there's a deeper interpretation that you're binding yourself to Torah in order to bring the godliness into Torah. And that brings the Er Chadash, which seemingly is connected to the Kalayan part, the Kala part. Even though in the Kala part you could also say there's the element of quenching your thirst, which is also for your purposes. But then there's a dimension that you're bringing the Torah down, the godliness into the Torah.
But isn't God already invested in the Torah without our avoda? I mean, that's the first step. God looks into the Torah, he connects himself to Torah, and then Torah takes a further step to connect down to this action, you said, implementation.
But the Torah itself, like he says in Tanya, the Torah itself comes down. Once it comes down below, it, as I said, can be easily disconnected from its source. Not like a soul, because you can learn Torah like we learn mathematics, lahavdil, and forget there's this giver of Torah.
But the emes is still...
The emes of soul is also the emes. We're talking about revealing it.
Oh, revealing.
The emes, everything by emes is connected. Even the world is connected. The whole purpose is consciousness.
I thought smoking, learning Torah as an intellectual exercise.
Yeah. No, but I thought the thing here is there's like a switch. Well, by us learning it, it was a proper kabbalah or whatever, to bind ourselves, we turn a switch that God then flows into the Torah up there.
With the switch or without the switch.
Where
They're right. That's exactly correct what you just said. And that does something for us and does something for the Torah too.
and without us learning it,
If we have Simchas Torah, we dance. Why does the Torah need us to dance with the Torah? You're elevating the Torah. Remember, the Torah is God's wisdom. He said clearly, wisdom could also not be completely connected to the source that's beyond wisdom.
what is that in Rosh Hashanah on the first line, top line? Ches Shin Mem Ayin.
Chachma Shal Ma'ala.
Does that imply that if nobody would, God forbid, if nobody would learn Torah, if there was nobody in this physical world learning Torah, that even though God created the Torah already, there would God would not be fully invested in the Torah because He's lacking the element of us learning it. That would affect His relationship, His unique relationship with Torah itself, on His terms.
Torah is a blueprint. Torah does not have legs and arms to implement anything. So without people to implement, the Torah remains just a book. The people that study and follow the Torah bring it alive, and through that keep this world going. So what would the Torah be? It would just be a book. It would be like so.
No, because you could, according to that analogy, you could have an architect that writes up a blueprint and spends his whole time into this unbelievable design of this blueprint, with nobody to ever utilize that and actually build the building. But it's his architect with his blueprint. He's involved with his blueprint.
That's correct. That's what the Torah begins as. It's God's delights, and it's God's personal, so-called child, nurtured by God. And then there's a purpose. Dira b'tachtena. You need to build the building. Not just build the building, we're talking about now repair the building or elevate it. The building God builds. But then it says that Israel comes and through learning Torah and fulfilling it, they kaima alma. They elevate and fulfill the purpose of existence. That's even more important. God gives us the machine. Then He gives us a blueprint. Then comes the main work, is making sure the machine is now elevated to live according to this blueprint. And that achieves things. Of course, that fulfills the purpose of existence. We're not talking about small matter here.
It achieves down here, but as far as involved, does it also affect God's involvement?
I just said 5 times, yes. He just keeps saying, the whole point is this. The whole mimer about this. This is just summing up that mimer. That yes, that down below, even though it gets ostensibly disconnected, but when you reconnect it, you achieve a chiddush that does not exist above. The souls are connected to the letters, not to the wisdom. The Torah is itself only wisdom, and then it gets connected to the source of the etzem. So it says, "Ha'atzmus ein sof b'Torah," not just the chochmah. V'chein b'Torah shedavka yidei yidasa lamata. Here we go. And the same thing. That's about the souls. So the souls get connected in these 2 ways. You have to say those are the 2 forms of hiskashus.
It's interesting. He says it right after. He's mamshich atzmus ein sof, and then he says parenthetically that's the 2 ways.
Correct.
The Lord is talking about the 2 higher levels of learning and not connected or not.
So that's the 2 ways that one binds himself to Torah. You could bind yourself to Torah for your needs, or you bind yourself to Torah for the Torah's need.
Both of them Hashem Torah. Every 30 years.
They're not both L'Shem Torah. One is not L'Shem Torah. One is L'Shem your soul. 2 separate levels. One is Adaita de Nafsha.
That's before davening. After davening.
That's just when they play themselves out. But it's two ways of studying Torah. You can study Torah after davening also for yourself. Yeah, people do that all the time.
I seem to be calling the even the when Rabbis not Simon Nasha seem to also be calling out the Shem Torah.
No, it's not true. He says it's not L'Shem Torah, it's L'Shem Atzmi. He says it beferish. Why don't you go back?
I don't see it. You'll show me where it says not L'Shem.
Yeah, it's specifically. He says it. It's
I didn't see that.
L'Hoyer Nafshe. He says.
Horror Nashi. Nevertheless, in the Kitzur,
No, there's no kids. He never says contradicts that.
he says after Tefillah, when the Torah Shmor.
You ask me where it says. It says right here. Look at page 360.
What time?
The whole section.
Yeah, I read it all. It doesn't say anything about me. It says, it seems to be saying that in comparison to the second level.
She'ein zela. It's not to radiate his soul.
Yeah, in comparison to
What's that? It's not in order to quench his thirst.
yeah.
Mashenkin, in contrast, this way,
Nevertheless.
it's as clear as it gets.
Okay, nevertheless, it seems that it's drawing a line between two dark of the Torah. Before davening, the Zayt Nafshe. After davening,
This is also Adait the Nafshe.
yes, after davening, okay. After davening, it seems that there's two darkers in the Shmo.
No. Two dargis in. No, absolutely wrong. And I'm just telling you straight for that. Don't say that unless you have no basis. You just said the opposite.
I'm going to say here, I'm going to bring a proof. It says the fifth line that gets here. After Tefillah, you limit the Torah with Shmo, Shemamshi, going to be Torah, and this Kasher, this Yachid, this Chachshus, this Kasher, the Torah, Al Tefillah, Tefillah, Ein, Behin, Gil, Behin, Shachshus, Kim, the Torah, Shachshus.
It's a separate issue.
That's called maybe Shmo.
That's a separate issue completely. That's a separate.
But that's our Tzimah.
No, anyway, no, you're wrong. You're just absolutely wrong. You're not reading it right. The Kitzur is exactly what it says inside. I don't know where you're getting what you're saying. You're reading your own interpretation. You're not reading what it says here. He says clearly that after davening you also have a learning of Torah that's only to quench the thirst, which is for you. That means Adaita de Nafshe, I would tell you. And then there's one that's completely for learning Torah just for itself.
Learn the Kitzur.
The Kitzur is exactly what it says inside. There's no difference.
I don't see it, but okay. I don't see it at all.
No, you show me something here that says that quenching your thirst is Lishma. Where does it say that?
Show me where it's not.
I just showed you. He just said Mashenkein.
It doesn't say. All it is.
Okay. Anyway,
Okay.
you could. I'm telling you what my position is, and I say it adamantly. I don't even have a doubt about this.
I understand, but it seems to me it's like in contrast that you could say that within the Shmo.
You're making your own words. Why don't you just say it's two levels of? Why not just say it's two levels for your personal gain? Why can't you say that? Much easier to say that.
Let me answer why. So L'Shem Torah, it says before that L'Shem Torah is where Mamshik or the Torah. Why one is to be Ir Nafshe, but the second way is to be Mamshik or the Torah. Now that happens to be, that's very good. It's, in comparison to the second level, that's only to quench his thirst.
I don't know. Right now, you lost me completely. I asked you one simple question. Why can't you just say there's two elements of how you can learn for your own purpose? One is that's what it says here. That's what Pastor says.
I don't see that's Mahavik. I disagree with the way they learn Pshat.
You can disagree. Gesundheit.
Yeah. Okay. Don't usually. I'm not convinced. Mostly because of the Kitzur. I would agree with you 100% except for the Kitzur. The Kitzur puts them both together.
With all due respect, the Kitzur doesn't say anything different than it says inside. What you're doing is you're going with a preconceived notion. You didn't understand. For you, it's hard to change back channels. That he's going back to the Shalei L'Shema. That's what you're having difficulty doing. Because once he said that, he spoke, that once you stuck in your head that learning Torah after davening is L'Shema, you think that that's it. There's no way of saying that it's not. And he's saying that, he's not saying that. He's actually saying that there is that element. He says it clearly. It's almost impossible to learn otherwise. I don't even see how one can.
All right.
What to Mashenkin? He's saying it's not to quench your thirst, but to bring godliness into Torah.
Yeah.
That's a but. A very clear difference. One is L'Shema, one is not.
In his own overview, how he approaches it, He says after Tefillah, he says there's going to...
I told you you're stuck in that, so you're unable to change channels. That's what you're saying.
Possibly.
But I just asked you a question. What is the contrast between quenching your thirst? So I told you, one is lishma, one is not.
I'm working on that. Okay, after that...
So you have still a question, according to your approach. My approach explains it. You're still working on the question, because you'll see, when you answer that question, you'll come to this conclusion.
I have to answer the question also. The answer to the question...
There's no question by me.
The answer to the question is that, in Darga, you can be a normal human being who's going to Shmo, and that happens to include that part of learning that your mom should learn the Torah, but you're not past Madrega, where it's for your own personal need. But that's so-called Shem Torah. Your mom should learn the Torah. Your mom should...
You're not mom should learn the Torah. You're quenching thirst. That's all you're doing.
He says your mom should learn the Torah.
No, he says you're quenching thirst. He says Mashenkin, you're not mom. He says Mashenkin. He keeps saying it's not. And the Kitzur says it again, by the way. Anyway, read it on your own. Do me a favor. Read it on your own. And you address it. So read it again. Sometimes read another 5 times. Sometimes you need to do that. You see clearly, I'm standing by what I'm saying. I don't see any basis of what you're saying.
And then afterwards in the kitchen...
As a matter of fact, the more you say it, the more I realize how wrong it is.
Okay. Afterwards in the kitchen, then he says, Gam Yishmar Shakivu Tefillah Hibel Akusa.
You're saying, you're reading what you're reading. You're not reading what it says in this mimer. I have to tell you. That's what my sense is.
Could be. But still have... I'm going
I told you, read it again. I've read my Marim sometimes 30 times.
Okay, I've read this a couple times.
Okay, so enough, fine. So then don't read it again. What should I tell you? I'm giving you my suggestion.
Okay.
You read the Kitzur? Why don't you read the first 2 top lines of the Kitzur? That you forgot.
No, I didn't forget. That's a tremendous darga in the Shema that not everybody has.
This is your own words. A tremendous darga Shema that not everybody has. He doesn't say such a thing. This is your own theory. No, he doesn't say such a thing. He says, just read that.
That's like our Rashbi.
Not to quench your thirst. Who cares? But he says it's not to quench your thirst, which means it's about your thirst. It's to draw down God to this world, not about you. You could say there's 2 levels in about you. You could say one level is to awaken, like you said, in the morning. And another level is to quench your thirst, but it's also about you. I don't know what the problem is.
Then he should say, in the Kitzur, he should put...
He says exactly that in the Kitzur.
The Shema after that part. After he mentions that.
Okay, look, we're not going to go in circles here. Read it again. You don't want to read it again? Don't read it again.
60 more times.
So don't read it. I told you.
Can I tell you? Again 60 more times. I have no problem reading it.
I'm just telling my suggestion. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. I'm going to think about it.
Why don't you just say this? If a person who doesn't learn Torah all day altogether, and then he goes to learn Torah for his own needs, to awaken God, that's also the Shema. Compared to taking care of your own needs all day, learning Torah, even for your own needs, is already the Shema. But that's not called the Shema, what he calls here. Everything's relevant. You could say a person who's all day busy with himself, doesn't learn Torah all day. Then another guy learns Torah only for one reason, for selfish purposes, to bring godliness into him. Compared to someone who's not learning Torah, they could also call that Lishma, if you want to have a relativity theory.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if he wasn't referring to that kind of idea.
Okay, but then any learning Torah, even if it's completely, even the morning Torah, even the one before davening, is also relative to not learning Torah. You can call it Lishma, but that's not what he calls Lishma.
I understand, and that's why I thought he made a difference between if I did not shave, just to wake himself up. He was more in his nefesh and neshama.
But he's making also a distinction between quenching your thirst and that. So there's also there if you want the relativity, there's also. So he's making that distinction too.
I was wondering in the world, how do you,
We're not saying that the learning Torah after davening that quenches your thirst is necessarily the same learning Torah in the morning that ignites you. But they both have one similarity, that there is something about you that is serving. So that's the bottom line. That's the key here. Remember, you have to stick to the theme. The theme he began, the whole chapter begins, there's 2 ways to learn Torah. Torah for yourself, another for bringing godliness into the Torah. As soon as you say, my thirst, you're already going back to yourself. Good, it's a higher level self. Fine, one is just to ignite in the morning, as he says. Another is to, I gave the example that, first of all, you warm up, you stretch in the morning, then you exercise, that's davening. You stretch is the learning before davening, then you exercise is davening, then you cool off and get back the energy into Torah which has two stages too. One is to quench the thirst that happened during your exercise, and then finally you settle in where your day begins and you've internalized that divine dimension. I did speak about 4 levels. So relatively speaking, you want it relative? The word relative is fine. You can just use the word relative. The Shema has relative stages.
Yeah, and I've seen absolute. I know there's a difference, but I wonder what you could call it. Because there's no word for Shema from where he starts talking about Ufana days all the way to the end of the thing here, and so it's hard to make that distinguish. And then that's where it's got. It doesn't say for Shema. This whole area here. This is Shema. That's not Shema. He's just contrasting the 2 levels of Shema. Then when he comes back and he puts them together in the Kitzur, that's why he left me with my conclusion. That's why I drew the conclusion. They might be talking about a relative issue, not an absolute issue.
Well, now you see you were mistaken.
Why Hashem was mistaken? I'm asking Ari Jacobson, telling you what I think. So, I'm mistaken?
Look.
I'll certainly be moda.
You could say, one second. I don't think he's mistaken entirely, because I told you there is a flow. The flow goes like this. There's 2 ways of learning Torah. Mikara, when a person begins, he does it adaita denafshe. What's in it for me? Not even a bad thing. You wake up in the morning. You're just a new day. Your divine soul is not yet alive and kicking. You want to get yourself, you're living in Gashmizdika world. The soul is concealed in this physical world. If you don't do anything in the morning, God forbid, you immerse yourself right into the material world, you'll be overcome by it. So you want to kickstart.
Reboot.
Jumpstart. Right. So what you do is learn Torah. What does Torah do? He says, it's Mekasha to Torah. The goal is to ignite your spark plugs. Right? To reignite. So you start learning, awakens you, think about God, think about these levels. This is Adaita Denafsha. It's not about the Torah, it's about you. Okay. This then leads to davening. So this is what I'm saying is very, very clear right in the beginning. I'm just summing up that chapter. This leads to davening. Let me just see a second. Yeah, there goes the whole thing. Then he says, this leads to davening. I just want to see the exact language. What happens by davening? It's like you wake up in the morning when you're asleep and then you awake. And you wake him up. Okay. This waking up is 2 things. It ignites and it also weakens the nefesh habamis, and it's called bondage to it's being held hostage with this world. And then comes davening. And when davening is proper, and you start you start not just ignite. Now the nefesh, the soul is coming alive in its connection to God through davening, because you've already jump started, right? So now it's really the car is driving. You're running. You're exercising your divine faculties. You're running. Then he says, then the learning of Torah after davening is binding your soul to the Torah, the wisdom and desire of God, and you're drawing down now the cushion Torah. So it's not like what it was when you warmed yourself up, when you ignited yourself in the morning, the jump start. That was more to get you going. Now that you're alive and your soul's alive, now you're giving back the Torah. Before you were taking the Torah was like your fuel. Now you're giving fuel to the Torah, basically. You bring it in. So that's the original discussion. That means that the study of Torah after davening is not in order to illuminate your soul. That's what he says. V'hafto brings v'haya dvarim eila, etc., etc. Then he asks a question. So you stop there. If you stop here, you basically have two levels of Torah. One is Esek Torah to get you going. The other is what you give back, and you bring mamshech godliness into Torah. That's up till here. Then he asks a question. So what's now the connect? What's the chidush of Torah over davening? The Torah after. Seemingly, it's two levels: Torah before and the tefillah. What do you need another Torah for? So he gives two answers. One answer is that the tefillah is rotzeh. It's a state of yearning. It's not integrated. It's not settled. It's like the running. It's exercise. And Torah brings it into pnimius. That's his first answer. So yes, tefillah does bring you closer, but it does not draw it into you. And Torah draws it into you. Shasrus benafshe. Now right here you could ask a question. So in other words, he's getting back that it has to be about me, because he's integrating it. That's not necessarily what he's saying. He's saying that tefillah is, you've gone now and you're reaching to God, and you're going upward. But you need it to be integrated. Integrated doesn't mean you're doing it for you. It just means it needs to be internalized. He doesn't really qualify. He just says that's what he says. So then he qualifies, says the learning Torah before davening, that's only a reflection. And after davening is atzmi. So basically, so even though the tefillah prayer is what came through prayer, but in the prayer it's not a gili adayin, but a gili hu b'teira. That's the first explanation. The second explanation is that the kiruv, through the closeness through tefillah, is only the godliness that relates to existence, that which you can come to on your own through your contemplations. And Torah introduces the error, an energy that's beyond existence. So in other words, the two explanations basically is, one is the Torah is integrated and be revealed. With tefillah, it's like it's still in a state of rotzeh and yearning. And the second is that the Torah brings down a whole new level. This is the two things that he explains. Now, right now, when you stop right here, you could just say, okay, fine. So now we understand what the Torah after davening does compared to the Torah, compares to tefillah, to prayer. But then he goes on, and that's where it gets more complicated. So then he says, after he finishes this, that the bittul is also deeper than that. Then he goes, when a person studies Torah, he says the soul gets united completely. Okay. And that's why, through the learning of Torah, you bring down Ein Sof in Torah. Then he says, She'ein ze lo hayir nafshi. And now he's qualifying. This bringing down godliness into the Torah is not in order to do something for you, to irradiate you, to illuminate you. Rather, it's in order that the Torah should be brought into the alakus, godliness should be brought into the Torah. And then he starts saying, so it means the Torah is not in order to quench the thirst, like in the first way. Which apparently means, in other words, that these two ways that he just described, that the Torah does after davening, also has two elements. One is to quench the thirst. And the other is not to quench the thirst, but it's to draw down godliness into Torah. And this is clearly speaking now the Torah after davening. That's where he was saying, so apparently now he's talking in Lishma. But he makes it clear he's not Lishma. That's what I'm saying. He's clearly saying he's going to back to what's your nefesh. I agree. It's a higher level of because it's coming after davening. So for sure you're on a higher level. There's no question about that. Before davening, you don't even have your nefesh l'kis awake. Now you have it awake. Now you have it really running. So this too, but he still says that there's an element that is quenching your thirst. So it seems from this that the first interpretation, what Torah does, that Tefillah doesn't have, still has an element of personal gain, because it's quenching that thirst. That's a thirst, and it's bringing it into you. So it has subtly. In other words, you could basically say there's two levels of Shalei Lishma, so to speak. One is more subtle than the other. First is the morning. You start learning Torah compared to later where you're learning to bring God. And then even the Tefillah, Torah after davening, this is what I think I explained when we learned this. There's also the two elements. There's one element that it's to quench the thirst, so it's not mamish completely to bring Elikus into it. And there's the second element, you're bringing a whole new level of the divine in.
And that's still low lishma, that last level.
Now the last one I just said, that's Lishma. Then you bring it's Elikus into the Torah. It's only for that purpose. It's not to quench your thirst.
Is that what you hold by that?
I'm asking a question. I'm following the discussion. I'm listening.
By the way, if you skip the
It's for sure levels. They're all levels. They're not the same. I didn't say level 3 is like level 1.
I understand.
But in level 3 compared to level 4 is Shalei Lishma. It doesn't say those words Shalei Lishma, correct? But he says Lahayr Nafshe, Mashenkin, that's Gilei Elikus. It's as close as it gets to it. It means it's...
We got to the Kitzur. The Kitzur did what it did. I said to myself, what's his intention?
Okay, no, and the Kitzur doesn't change anything. The Kitzur is just summarizing this. It's just concentrated, that's all.
But he structured.
He structures it the same way. It's the same thing.
If you skip the first level,
Are you satisfied with this? Did you have Yeshuva Das?
Yeshiva does it a bit.
so you don't understand the word of it anyway. But then you realize you're a shmo, you learn it was shmo, because you don't understand the word of it anyway. So that's the shmo.
Yeah. As I learn it again, for sure this is the pshat. And this actually probably, now I'm thinking with this parentheses is clarified, the end of chapter, having the problem with that parentheses, 178. So what does he say there? He says yeah, I think this parenthesis, Eifan HaBeis, he doesn't mean the Eifan HaBeis in the Chiddush of Torah and Tefillah. I think Eifan HaBeis he means here in the first level, that Tefillah, it's not Eifan HaBeis. Kolskin, I'm sure it's Kolskin. Show the discussions. It means it's Ratzeh, so it's connecting to God. Okay. We wanted to say something? That's that.
If you skip the first level, the warm-ups, you believe it that as well, but
It doesn't say. I mean, I would think that if you skip the first level, you're going to have to go through the first level later. How could you skip it? If your soul is not alive, it's going to have to get awake some point.
and maybe even the first part of
It's not magic buttons here.
davening has the shnayos, as he said.
Well, let's put it this way: if you don't learn Chassidus before davening, yeah, that's Bapashas. I mean, he's talking about Messiah, or if you learn Nigla in a way that awakens your nefesh is great. But if you don't learn, then your davening is going to be on the most basic level, even as it is. Look what I was on. Most people, it's called lip service. There's that lip service minion. Yeah. There's a new shul called lip service.
If you're real shmo, you learn the shmo.
Kehillas lip service.
Kehillah
Kedusha. What do you think about that? Huh? Why don't you call a spade, right?
What is the precise type of the Mikara Adaiti?
Mikar in the beginning, initially.
Initially, Adaiti.
Adaited the nafsh means for the benefit of adaited, for the purpose of your nefesh.
For the purpose.
Personal gain. for your nefesh. To person the nefesh. It's like we say la'elim yasik adam b'ter mitzvah shalel shma m'tech shalel shma bal shma. So similar idea. The first you do it shalel shma, which means not for the Torah's sake, the Shema Torah. You're doing it for your sake. It's two words go together. You can't say adaita alone. Adaita de nafshe, you say. Adaita de nafshe means someone's doing it for his
own. The root there is knowledge, right?
For the benefit of it. Adaita de nafshe. It's like if you sent me, you hired me to represent you, I would be doing adaita to you. That's what it means. I'm doing it as your agent. Adaita means like an agent of. The kavon adaita means, and the das of, like aldas.
Aldas.
That's what adaita means. Aldas of your nefesh.
For the sake of.
Sake of, okay. So I would think that it all begins, listen, it's like a takeoff. If you start properly, you climb. If you didn't start properly, you're going to have to climb at some point anyway. You can't just, we're not talking about tshuva or, unusual circumstances where something propels you to another dimension unnaturally. Unnaturally meaning not the conventional way. We're not discussing that. We're talking about the regular routine of things, regular scheme of things. Every day you wake up and you need to ignite. You live in a material world and you need to constantly awake your soul. So that's the seder. If someone skips the early steps, can they jump? It seems to be a lot harder. I don't know, it doesn't spell it out. But regardless, I would say your davening is going to be lower, and then the davening, learning after davening will be lower. Everything's going to be lower because you never really, you just began later. That's how I think. I see it. If a person really absorbs this approach, they just have to, this is the routine. I think exercise is a perfect example. Let's say you didn't warm up, and then you exercised. First of all, you can get hurt. Secondly, your exercise may not be as effective. So the approach of a warm-up, igniting, getting yourself going, then exercising, really running fast, and then cooling down, and getting your strength back. And then, now your whole day is empowered. That's the final step of learning Torah. Then you're really immersed in the divine. It's almost like getting yourself lined up to the divine in the Torah requires you to first do a few things that take care of your own needs. If you're not going to eat, like the Tzemach Tzedek said to the Rebbetzin, said, better to daven in order to eat than to eat in order to daven.
Another way.
I'm sorry, better to write. To eat in order to daven than to daven in order to eat. So the eating is necessary because at least you took care of your bodily needs, so now it's not going to be in the way. If you're davening and you're still hungry, it's going to come back and haunt you and say, in the middle of davening, I can't think properly.
And what about the landing? As we just saw in San Francisco, landing is also very dangerous. It's not just the takeoff of a plane. The landing can cause that. So what is the...
For some reason, I'm not so concerned because you need to have a good takeoff to have a problem with a landing. Yeah, most of us have having problems taking off, but I agree with if you don't have a takeoff, you don't have to. It's like the guy says, I'm worried. I worry all the time. I'm worried about being fired. I wasn't even hired yet. And the point the point is, of course, Ratzei and Shuv. Listen, we have the problem. The people that Rabbi Avraham Amalek, those that needed the bagel and butter, that they have close enough, they need the grounding. Look, the three that were the Pardes.
But for the average person, he's not worried about that. What the average person is worried about, the landing has to be that now that he's done his chassidus before davening, then he's davening. Now he learned a little after. He learned that it brought God into the Torah. It's awesome. The Yushib in it. Then there's going on to the world, I guess, would be the dangerous part, is how would you take that and go out to the world?
No, but he doesn't go to the world. He talks about Torah after davening, meaning he doesn't even talk about people going to work. He doesn't get to. I mentioned that, but I'll tell you what. After the davening, let's see what davening really inspired you. So you have to cool that down. Not cool it down, in a negative way. You have to integrate it. That's what he calls l'ravish tzemainai. Because the tefillah is still in a state of restlessness. You're yearning, you're searching. Torah is gili. That's what he says. Those are the key words. It's gili, it brings it into... So now you've gotten that. So let's say that 10 minutes of learning after davening, so-called quenches the thirst that davening created. Then begins a new learning. Now you're learning, you're all alive, and you're integrated and settled, and you're learning now to bring Elokus into Torah. That's the fourth level that he describes here. That's where the shame, you're being connecting Kuchabrichu with Araisa, with Torah. Work, if you go afterwards to work, then your work is B'chol Derech HaChadei. You're taking everything you just experienced, and now you're refining the world with it. He doesn't mention this level, but that would be the next natural stage. But now you're in a heightened state of consciousness. You're no longer going to work like a regular person. You're going to work with a person whose soul knows why it's here. So every step in the way in work is not about me. It's about how do I bring godliness into the world. That's what he said. Yeah, actually he does say, Mischasedim Kene. Ezru Chasid, Mischasedim Kene. Yeah. So then your work is simply now a platform to express what the divine. You're in a divine state now. Understand? That's what the tefillah, the Torah did. That's how I would explain it. And rest assured, even this fourth level, I'm sure, depending on whom, has different levels of Lishma, Shalei, Lishma. Even the fourth level where you bring the Lakus into Torah, you could also say you're doing it because you want it. It's because you have pleasure in that. Like we spoke, there's the Taina God, and you can do it because you get pleasure, because it's the pleasure of the king. Or complete bittul. So there's always levels of Lishma. This is all about the interface. Remember, there's nothing wrong. The whole purpose of existence begins with us having to relate to it. God does not want to annihilate us. Annihilation is not the function. L'sheves yitzar, it's to build a world, not to destroy it. But then we want to have a relationship with God on God's terms. So this is exactly what we're learning in Avodah here is exactly the whole idea in Haskalah that he's talking about Er HaBligvul, the 10 hidden spheres, and the spheres as they come below. If you want the 10 hidden spheres, that's how God sees existence. If you want to see it on our level, you have to go down to the spheres as they are down here. I explained this. This is the interface at work. Just he's talking now in Aveda, so it's like it's a beautiful picture. It's the same ideas, but he's now talking about it, how we implement it. Yeah. So look, on more general terms, if you remember, we spoke when you meditate. Let's say you're benching on the food that you just ate. You make a blessing. Or you're thanking God every day for Moedani, whatever. You're thanking God for the Bichas Ananin, right? The brachas we say. For giving us Seichel, and for giving us this, for giving us all these different blessings. Then you're relating to God as far as what it does for you. So if you're a mensch, and you realize you're breathing like a healthy human being, you don't have to struggle. You don't take for granted your blessings. You're thanking God. That's God on your terms. I'm not going to call it selfish. Selfish is a person who doesn't think about God altogether. That's real selfish. But even that level, relative to thinking what's good for God, I won't call it selfish. It's adaita denafshi. It's how it relates to you. You can't begin any other way. That's why the Torah says, Le'elam yasakadim b'Torah mitzvah shalei l'shma. Why does it say Le'elam yasakadim? Le'elam means that's always the way to go. There's only one way to go. You have to begin for ulterior motive. Why does it say that? Why not begin with unknown? Because that's how we're wired that way. God made us subjective creatures, Adam Kar, that you should feel your pain before you feel another's. You should feel your needs. There's even halachas about it. If you have enough water only for one person, you're in the desert, and you control the water, you have to drink it yourself. Not because you're selfish, because the Torah says you have to take care of your needs. I'm not talking about now a teacher, a rav, or so on. Yeah. We're talking about certain circumstances. And the question halacha asks, are you allowed to forego yourself? The Torah says you have to take care of yourself, but maybe you can, and there's a shot, some say you're not allowed to, because then you're killing yourself for helping someone else, who says that's not pekuach nefesh. Pekuach nefesh is you have to take care of your nefesh first. I'm not talking about, most of us will drink the water ourselves for other reasons, because, for purpose. But the Torah said, because God made it that way, that He wants an existence where there's a personal element to it. He wants us to be integrated in our lives, and therefore self-interest is not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if it controls your life. So that's why the Torah begins that way. We educate our children. We don't say Torah is emes, that's why I learn it. I'll buy you ice cream. I'll give you a reward. The question is, isn't that a lie? Why don't you just tell them this is what God wants? Because for a child, understanding what God wants, like when they smeared honey and sugar on pages, you could say, what do you mean? It's sweet? But for a child, spiritual sweetness and physical sweetness is nishtalshel from spiritual sweetness. So when you give a child sweet, the Rebbe explains this with the story with the Frierdiker Rebbe. Erev Pesach, they found candies in his pocket. As he said, when they took him to Cheder, they told him Malach Mochal threw him these candies. He didn't want to eat them. So the Rebbe asked a question on the custom of the saying that. What do you mean Malach Mochal? Everyone knows the parents are throwing the candies. What Malach Mochal? The child will grow older, he'll find out you lied to him. That's chinuch. To tell the child something that's not true. There's a whole sikh, a beautiful sikh. The Rebbe asks us the same questions about chinuch in general. The Rambam says when you teach children, chanechel na al pi darkei, you give them a reward, incentives, it will take you on a trip. Everyone does this. Not just, we don't do it because we're weak. Al pi teira, that's the way it's supposed to be done. Chedus, al taras ha-kedush is the way it was done. That's how you teach children. Al pi darkei. So again, one day will grow up and they'll say, that was not for the reward, you lied to me. You deceived me, you manipulated me. And the Rebbe's answer is both profound and the whole foundation of the whole purpose of existence. When you educate a student and you give a mashal, you explain something to the student with an example. And that example helps them understand it, and then they come to understand it without the example. They don't need the example. So they'll say the same thing. You manipulated me through the example. You're not going to say that. You say, at that stage, had I tried to explain to you the idea itself, you wouldn't have gotten it. The mashal was a handle. God blessed us that a mashal is a lavush for the nimshal. It's a garment for the nimshal, a keli. So I used the keli because I couldn't give you the eir itself. So I gave it to you. That's not manipulation, that's a blessing. It's the same thing. Why did God create candies in this world? Why is there sweetness physical? Why are there awards and so on? Because it's a manifestation of spiritual reward. For a child, yet he cannot understand the nimshal, so you give it to him through sugar and through honey. Malach Michal is throwing the candies. But the way Malach Michal works, the shliach is the parents. So it's Malach Michal using their arms. It's a whole sikha about it. Basically, in other words, so the Shlei the Teich Shel, that's why the Rebbe says, Teich Shel Lishma Bo Lishma. Not just from ulterior motive, you come to Teich. The Pnimis of Shlei Lishma is really Lishma. Except you don't know that yet, because you are still a child, so you need an incentive. The truth is, you want to do it, but your Yetzer Hara doesn't let you, like the Rambam Pascha. So you have to give something to the Yetzer Hara to make it to placate it. But the truth is, what's really going on is, I'll give you the story that Baal Shem Tov captures it. This is a very fundamental point. The Baal Shem Tov's famous example why Chassidim drink mashke. I always use it in broader terms why Jews talk about food all the time. I always ask, what's a knee-jerk reaction? Holiday, food, Shavuos, blintzes, Chanukah, latkes, Purim, Hamantashen, kreplach, whatever it is, kishke, knedlach, kugels. For some reason, everything that begins with a K, And Pesach has its own menus. And even Yom Kippur we're obsessed with not eating. And then Yom Kippur we eat double. Eating, right? I always ask this, everyone laughs. I said, what's so spiritual about eating all the time? The joke. They wanted to kill us, we were saved, let's eat. So what's this? So the Baal Shem Tov's answer, the Baal Shem Tov's mashal for mashke is unbelievable mashal. I use it so often, it's excellent. It just captures about the king who's aging and ailing, and when he wants his son to inherit the throne, but his son grew up and spoiled in the palace, wants him to earn his way, so he sends him to a distant land. He says, I'll send you to a distant land where no one knows you. You won't have all the ministers catering to you. And you have to earn your way. You'll learn to be sensitive. You'll learn to be wise. Of course, the king is pained by having to send his child away, so he says, I'll send you a letter several times a year to remind you. And they cry, they hug, and they kiss, and the child goes off. And as the king predicted, yes, after a little while the child forgets. He gets accustomed to the ways of the land. So he sends him a letter several times a year to remind him, because when the son gets the letter, he remembers where he came from and where he's going, what he's being groomed to become. he wants to celebrate. The problem is, how's he going to celebrate? He's living here, no one's going to understand why he's celebrating. He's going to tell people, but I'm the king's son, I'm going to be your king one day. They'll think he's either crazy or they'll be offended. So he says, you know what? A party time. He throws a party. I mean, this is the way I tell it. It's a little embellished, but the Baal Shem Tov's mashal. Free cocktails on me, meal, a whole festive meal. So the whole town doesn't ask questions. They're dancing and celebrating because they got a free meal. And meanwhile, he's celebrating with them. He knows for the letter that he received from the king. That's the mashal of the Baal Shem Tov. So he says the king is God. The neshama is the child. Sham in Gan Eden doesn't earn its way. It's basking in the waters, in natural waters, the spiritual environment. Of course, that's what it wants. God says, no, I want you to prove yourself. I want you to transform the world. So it sends it away, sends the neshama down to earth, and we're made to forget. The Malach comes, makes us forget the Torah we learned in our mother's womb. And to remind us, Hashem says, gives us mitzvahs. He gives us Yom Tovim. It's a letter coming from God. Problem is, comes a Yom Tov, the soul is now inside the body. The body's not interested in spiritual messages. So God says, you know what? Feed the body. Give it food, give it drink, let it sleep a little extra. Give it the whole... So the body is celebrating because it's getting all this good stuff. It doesn't ask questions. Meanwhile, the soul is celebrating with the body, but for the letter that came. So I always say the problem is most of us forgot about the letter and we only have the holiday. We only have the party. But that's the mashal. It's an excellent mashal. It's a mashal for Yaakov and Esav, why Yaakov had to dress up in the garments of Esav. I mean, you can explain 1,000 things with this. The point is, that's exactly the point I'm making here. The Shlei Lishma. You need to have the Torah on our terms because we live in this world. You tell somebody, forget about your body, forget about your needs. Just come and connect to God. You're rarely going to find someone that's capable to do that. Even those that are spiritual. And what are you supposed to do? Like the Rambam says, why Chacham were waiting for Mashiach? Because they wanted to have the peace of mind. Their bodies should not distract them. They could serve God. Because we the physical needs. You have to eat. You have to drink. There's some things you can't avoid. Not even getting into all the other needs that we, the real or imagined. But the point is, Chassidus teaches you want to use a person's needs and you want to use their personal interests toward Elokus. So you have to begin. That's our interface. Find ways to so-called masquerade, or find ways to. I don't want to say manipulate, but in a way it is. Find ways to convince this body it's also good for it. That's the bottom line. You tell people Shabbos is a day, but there's no chont, and no nothing else, and all you're going to do is learn Torah and daven. Most people will not be able to handle it. But you give them, the Shabbos, people look forward to the special meals, we dress up, it's like a whole thing. So the point is, it's like the Malach Machol thing. It's Elikus, but Elikus Melubish, manifest in garments that we can deal with. It's very similar to a student. You're giving Aleph Beis, you're giving him an example in handles. You're giving handles to be able to hold on to it. That's what it comes down to. As we grow and elevate, like the Rambam explains in Hilchos Tshuva, Shalei Lishma, you start growing to higher levels. Okay, now there's value in it for its own sake. But it's not 1-2 levels. It could be 1,000 levels, because you could still be doing it for a little more for you, a little less for you. It grows until you come to the highest point where the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Yud, that only Avram had this. Avram was called Avram Oyavi. God is the only one that God called my beloved Avram. And he says there because Avram Eisa Se'emes Mipnei Shu Emes. He didn't do Aveda not for Elam Haza, not even for Elam Haba, because Elam Haba is also Leil Shema. I'm going to get spiritual rewards, eternal life. Not for anything, just Emes Mipnei Shu Emes. So there's a sikha, there's a very powerful sikha, Kisisa Memtes, where the Rebbe speaks about giving tzedakah. So he talks about levels. The tzedakah is one of the mitzvahs where Leil Shema is just as good as not just as good, but it's considered to be the mitzvah, because who cares what your intentions are if these other persons being helped? There are mitzvahs, if you do it with the wrong kavanah, the mitzvah is valueless. In tzedakah, that's why tzedakah, you can give tzedakah. I'll give tzedakah to save my child. God says, test me with this. It's the only mitzvah where God, because tzedakah is the one that person is being helped. It goes even further. The Rebbe brings there, even if you lose $1, someone finds it and it helps them. Even if you're asked, if you had known your $1 was lost, would you let the person say, no, I want it back? You still get the mitzvah. In other words, even if your kavanah is the opposite. Because the bottom line, somebody was helped. So the Rebbe says there, then there's the tzedakah, the true tzedakah. He brings from Matbeya Shel Eish. That Eish introduces an element that you're not doing it for any type of personal gain. You're doing it only for God Himself. But you can't reach that level without going through the other levels. So the same thing is Limud HaTorah and so on. It's not easy because you could say at the end of the day, even the pleasure of Mesiras Nefesh, you could say, some people have pleasure in indulging in a cholent, and others will have pleasure in giving their lives away to God. So why is that not self-interest? So that's a long discussion. Because there could be a level there also. You could say, you know what? So you come to spiritual. But Chassidus speaks, there is a place of Mesiras Nefesh that's a completely opposite of human nature to give off your life to something else, even if you think there's a benefit. But this is not for here. That's another discussion. This actually goes back to the discussion back a few chapters back. We spoke about Re'usa Deliba. Or we spoke about the deepest level of Bittul, the Tainuk. We spoke about, where was that? Also last Maimer. You remember where it was? Yeah. The Eved. Yeah, here, chapter 174. Shashua Melech Batzmus, that's right, that's the whole point there. It is relevant to our discussion. Where you do it completely, he goes through a lot of levels in chapter 174 of Shalei Lishma till he gets to a point where you do it completely. You could do mitzvahs. It's exactly the same idea, by the way. Chapter 174, now that I realize, is in mitzvahs the same idea that he speaks here in chapter 176 in Torah. There he speaks of mitzvahs, why you do mitzvahs. So begins, the reason is Kavanas mitzvah in order to bring Hamshach of Elokus into you and into the world. Then he speaks a higher level, is in order to fulfill God's will. That you have pleasure when God's will is fulfilled, when you fulfill God's will, that you have the merit. Then he goes deeper, that not even if someone else fulfilled God's will and you didn't have the merit, you also have pleasure, because it's not about you. Because there you could also say it's about me. Instead of enjoy what the mitzvah does for me, I enjoy that I had the schus to be His shliach. Then he says there's a level where even that you don't have. All you care about is that God's will is fulfilled. Then he says there's a level where even that doesn't matter. As soon as God has pleasure, you have pleasure. Nothing else. That's it. You're just purely, completely non-existent. Whatever is God's pleasure becomes your pleasure. To the point that it actually transforms your faculties. It's a whole chapter, a very powerful chapter, 174. So it does relate to what we're talking about. You'll see this theme throughout Ayin Beis. Because I went back for some reason, I was looking at, remember another complicated chapter we learned, the beginning of Matis. Because they're making the Marmakemis now on it. So the guy who's working on it. Not always, no. And you can't come to the last without the first.
God's pleasure. I mean,
this is the rule. I don't know if I ever heard this, but I can tell you because I have this question. The people who ask the question, at the end of the day, even the highest is also your pleasure. Even the fact that you have no pleasure. Right. The ones that ask that question is because they never experience the lower levels. You can't understand that until you go through those levels. That's the bottom line. Because as long as you're still a person who's driven by some self-interest, even the subtle space, you can't relate to something that's not like that. So the only way to get to that point is to be there. And when you're there, then there's a different experience. You can't explain it, for sure. I was just learning the Sikha Kisisa Memtes. You know what? Give it to me a second. Sefer Sikha Tash Memtes, volume 1. I just want to read to you. I remember when we prepared it. It's unbelievable. It's a very powerful Sikha that captures the ideas here. She says like this, the Rebbe the Lashem is there. I just want to give you a language where the Rebbe says like this. Is it Kasisa? Yeah. So the Rebbe says, it says in Yiddish, und das aber sofsa verbunden mit Asibe, mit Aderfar. That the certain Aved is still connected to a reason. There's a reason. Then then the Rebbe says there's a point where you do something where there's no farvos. There's no reason altogether. And it gives the example of when someone, let's say, hears moedim and just automatically bows. In other words, you're not even conscious. That's that level. You see, consciousness is the problem here. You're conscious, so now I'm conscious, I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it for God, I'm doing it not for me and only for God. Once you lose that consciousness and you become literally so bottled that whatever happens, God affects you. You're not doing it for that reason. There's nothing there but a higher consciousness. That's where
To have kavanah, to have no kavanah.
you begin that way, but there comes a point where you just simply that you're just there, and you can't. It's not something you can achieve. Exactly right. Because as soon as you're conscious, then it's already the consciousness is the problem. So then my consciousness is the reason I'm doing it. That's when the etzem connects to netzem. That's like he brought. If you remember by Rusa Deliba, the chapter in the beginning of Matis, he brought that there were 3 levels in Rusa Deliba, which Rusa Deliba is. I'm talking now chapter. But the 158. It's a very complicated chapter. So he brought Rusa Deliba means the desire of the heart. He's talking about the natural desire that a soul has to connect, not one that is away. Not a Rusa means the rotzen, the will of the heart. Not talking about emotions that are awakened by intelligence. No, not by that are born by intelligence. Like you can contemplate on something and come to realize I like it. I want it. We're talking here that you may need his bonus, but it's only to awaken something that's already there. In Tanya, the 2 sections, the first part of Tanya, where he talks about Moich Shal Ta'alev, that the mind can awaken something, but then the second is the Avim Mishoteres that's already there, you need to awaken. It's 2 different types of approaches. The first would be more, like I gave the example, explaining on your terms why this should be beneficial for you. The second is explaining, but it's really to awaken something you already have dormant inside of you, like that. So he says there are 3 levels of Rusa Deliba. He says there's a Rusa Deliba that needs some isbannus, but then there's one when the awakening is there, the intelligence goes away. Then there's one where you actually contemplating on the Eifen Hafla, on God's grandeur. So then his bonus can be there even while you have the awakening. And then there's like Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. There's no his bonus at all. Just the etzem is drawn without anything. I'm just giving that to be an example of the highest level where you are completely one. But in the context of Ayin Beis, the bottom line is that the interface and all the levels has always an element where it relates more to you, and there's always an element that relates more to the divine. So I wouldn't jump and say I need one extreme or the other. Our goal is to find where do you stand, and you want to move a little. That's the goal. Just like with our children. You're doing it now for a little more of your interest. Maybe the kavanah this year you'll do a little less you, a little more God. And you find examples of that, getting out of your comfort zone, doing something inconvenient. That's the goal. The goal is to climb here. This is not about jumping to Lishma Mamish. That's why I said about learning Torah. Begin the way you could, and then look at, can I take the Torah that I'm learning and doing it not just because I'm gaining, a little more for the public good, for God's good. That's what it comes down to. The ultimate is Shashim Lefonov, that the Torah is Mamish, God's delight, and you just delight into that. But it's not realistic. If you talk to your mashpia wants to help you grow where you are to here. You don't want to go, I learned this. The key is to learn this relative to where you are, or else it won't have any practical application. And everybody can definitely use this to grow. That's the bottom line. I think that's the key here.
But the ideal, not what you just said, the ideal, like you asked that question in New York, in Manhattan, where you said...
The ideal is to win the marathon, right? You want to be the number 1 winner of the marathon.
But I don't know, but you said that the ideal of being united here, what is ultimate unity? Do you want to retain your own unity, your own individual consciousness, or should we be united with no individual consciousness and just be one octave? You asked that question in one of your classes.
Of course you want to...
Ultimately, the ultimate goal is for a Jew is to come to a level of no individual consciousness, or do we still ultimately maintain that? Is that the highest level?
When you come to the point, look, before the Tzimtzum, when Ein Sof filled all existence, we didn't have these options, right? So there, everything was just one all-encompassing, omnipresent unity. I'm working my way back. I'm going my way, orderly backward. God concealed the presence, the conscious presence, to create an independent consciousness called us. We emerge. And all the reasons. If had God not completely concealed it, there would be no room for us to emerge, because that truth was too all overwhelming, basically. It's too all pervasive. So now there's an independent consciousness. Think of ourselves. You wake up, I'm first. And you start working on yourself. So there's three philosophies you could have really here, three philosophical approaches, which you really can find almost all the schools of thought, whether it's Eastern thought, Western thought, even in Jewish itself, you'll find these three shittas. One approach could be, okay, God wanted this Nisayan to give us a test, concealing himself from us, for us to discover him. And that's what you have to do in your life, is basically learning to look for the ascetic lifestyle, like the Meraglim wanted. Materialism, let's avoid it. Let's get back to a spiritual place and try to reach that type of divine consciousness. Essentially, the individuality, or the individuality of a person has to be seen as a test and not as a objective. That's one approach. Another approach is the opposite. God is beyond me. I'm never going to reach God all the way. So I'll find a God on my terms. God tailored to my needs. That's approach number two. Obviously, there are variations in these two as well. And Chassidus Chabad specifically says no. We want both. We don't want to annihilate individuality. At the same time, we want all of God, not just part of God that fits our needs. So how do you do that? So this requires a far deeper understanding of Atzmos. Number one, realizing that by God, individuality and non-individuality is not a contradiction. That's number one. Number two, it's a process of slow step by step by step. First begin on your terms. Shalei Lishma, as I said. Learn on your terms. Grow, feel fulfilled, feel enriched, whatever it is. As you're learning it properly, since it's godly, you're going to climb. And you're going to come to a point, realize my needs are not that important. What's most important is what God wants. And then you come to discover that God wants your individuality. Not because you want it, because God wants it. And then it becomes part of the God unity. But you can't come to that if you don't go through the earlier steps. So that's why we have to go through basically Mamala Kalam and Seviv Kalam and Ta'atzmus. That's exactly Ayin Beis, by the way, in different words. The interface. First you have to go through Er HaGvul. Someone will say, you tell somebody, thank God, because he's completely beyond you. It's very hard for him to relate to. Thank God because he gave you mazon, so Zeh Hazon HaSakoyel, and thank him for giving you food and for health and life and blessings and children. Most people can relate to that. You say, but that's because, someone will say, 1 second, that's because God is good for you. Fine, no problem. That's how you begin educating someone. He's good for you. Then you come through a process of elimination, like Avraham Avinu came. Hey, 1 second, is this God that he sustains me? God was created to sustain me. I'm here to serve Him, or He's here to serve me. The Alter Rebbe told that chassid. That's your list of what you need, and what do you need it for? So now comes a point you start saying, what am I needed for? And you've matured to a point like a child. You can't expect a child at 5 years old to say, what am I needed for? A child has needs, and a child needs to be taught. We're also 5-year-olds psychologically in some ways. We have our needs. Then you come to learn, hey, there's a bigger picture here. And then you come to the point where the bigger picture says, I want you in this world. One of the most powerful pieces that I think is critical to understand with Chassidus is that Gvul that we know, we see it as Gvul. Finite world, and okay, that's where I live. I can't jump more than 10 feet high. I can't go 3 days without food. We have our... Then you come to realize there's a whole existence that's beyond Gvul, Bli Gvul. And you want to be part of it. But then what do you do with the Gvul? So you either reject it, which is some shittas. Even in Yiddishkeit you're going to find shittas. That's more the ascetic, the precious, the approach of Musar, breaking the world, And then you come to realize that the Gvul of the world, God created. And really the Gvul of the world, in your mind, it's a limit. From God's mind, it's just another way of His expression. So you come to realize that the finite nature of the world is just another expression of infinite godliness. So when you eat a matzah a certain way, or a shir, for us, it's because we live in a finite world, we need shiurim. When does Shabbos begin? When does it end? How much matzah to eat? How long does it have to burn? How long does, davening, shachris, shema, krishma, zman, shema is only till now. For us, it's part of the finite straight nature of existence. For God, it's just His way of wanting to be defined that way for now. But like He says with the example of Maris Gdelos and Maris Tanis, it's the same image, the same divine you see in a small mirror, or you can see in an infinite mirror. That God put Himself in limit and said, I could be found now between the two rods of the ark. It was not because He limited Himself. The same infinite now is here. So you come to realize that the Torah's medida of the Torah is not the finite nature of existence. It's actually a divine power of finite. So this is how you climb, and you come to a point where you come to realize that Gvul and Bli Gvul really are two sides of one coin. Now, right now we understand that it's a nice mind game, intellectual exercise. But in truth is you come to a point where I would say you lose your consciousness, but you don't lose your identity. Understand? In other words, I'll give you an example. I've used this example. Have you ever done something like you're so immersed in a project, you forget what time it is, you forget whether you're hungry or thirsty, you forget, you're not even conscious of yourself. That those are the most powerful experiences, because you're so immersed, you're not even thinking as an object and a subject. Adam and Chava before Chet Eitzadas were not conscious of their sexuality, they're not conscious of themselves, they were just divine creatures. So we are thrown into a world of consciousness, and we see consciousness as a quality. I'm aware. But the truth is, awareness is already a blindness. Because I'm aware means is me and what I'm aware of. Mola Aretz Deis Hashem means the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea like a fish in water. A fish does not know it's in water. This is its own reality. So there's knowing, you can gain knowledge and you can become knowledge. So Chassidus explains, you become one with the knowledge, you become one with it. A dry hand gets wet. Does water get wet? Imagine, not that you're learning Chassidus, but you are Chassidus. Then you don't get wet. You are it. Once you're it, your individuality and the thing that you're one with are one. But you can't come to it without going through the lower levels. Best way I can explain it. I hope it was helpful.
I love you can lose your consciousness but not your identity.
Yeah, because the consciousness is that you're aware, I'm aware. But there's a point where you're not even aware. It's just you. Life is like that, by the way. Right now, what is your left leg doing? Before you thought about it, it was just there. You didn't have to be conscious of it. It's the consciousness that really is our undoing. But on the other hand, it's what God wants. He wants adir v'tachtenim. He wants the conscious self to lose its consciousness and just get absorbed in the divine self. That's what it comes down to. But you can't begin without going through the steps
But maintaining your identity, identity starts with I.
But who's the real identity? It's the God that is the identity that God wants for you, not what you wanted for yourself. That's the point. Imagine a chassid standing before the Rebbe and saying, Rebbe, I've done this, I've done that, I've tried, I've used my strengths, but now I want to, whatever you tell me to do, that's what I want, that's what I will do. So it doesn't mean you lose your identity, you're surrendering your identity to a force that's greater than yourself. But you have to be in a madrega to do that without losing yourself. If you do that and destroy yourself in the process, it's not the goal. That's why the Rabbeim did not just overwhelm us with Giluyim. We have to choose. We have to, let's put this, we have to come to the plate. Or else or you have to see the curveball. No.
You have to see how the curveball breaks.
Right? You have to also see how the curveball is part of the whole scheme. Good swimmers are not the ones that can fight any tide. Good swimmers are the ones that know how to navigate. They go with the flow. So when the curveball breaks, you got to know how to break with it. You don't fight it. Or you get it before it breaks, as they say. בדרך כלל in בית לפרנס קשת השם ישראל Beze Fanas Kasha said you have to say those Tuefanim are. I'm going back to the Maimon here now. The Tuefanim is one, some of your own gain, and the other is for the Bimam Shechalakus and Teira. And then he says, V'chein b'teira shedafrei dardos l'mad. It's saying that's for neshamas. Now even though neshamas come down below and they're separate, through the connection of the Torah, they get to a higher place. Atzmus Ein Sof. Same thing with Torah, through his descent below, when neshamas is kasharon b'teira, and neshamas connected to Torah. That ha-teira miskashes is b'chinas atzmus ze'ina er chodesh mamshichim b'teira. So two things are happening simultaneously. Well, not simultaneously. Yisrael is connected to Torah. So down below, even though they are ostensibly separate, they reach Atzmus Ein Sof in Torah, whereas in their source they were only connected to the letters of Torah. Now they're reaching into the Atzmus Ein Sof. And that, he says, there's two ways that you connect to Torah. I guess Lishma or Lishma. You have to say that's Pshat. And then the Torah is also the connection, the bond. What is Torah's bond? The Torah bond is that even though it comes down below, and when the Shamash Yisrael connect with it, they bring into Torah Atzmus Ein Sof. Now it's connected, obviously, because and that in turn, okay, but that's not from them. Because seemingly the higher level of connecting to Torah, L'Shem HaTorah, is the second bond. Here it appears there's like three bonds. Is that what I'm asking? He did say in the previous chapter. What did he say in the previous chapter? 1 second. They're rooted in this. They come now to the Etzem HaTorah. It's interesting what he's mashma from here is that even the Lishma, the highest level of Lishma, is also ultimately, you have to say it's Lishma. He's saying here that the Zohar says there are three bonds. There's the Yisrael binds itself with Torah, and then Torah binds itself with God. So it goes like this: Yisrael binds itself with Torah. He says there's two elements to it, like we just spoke. One is you bind yourself to bring godliness into your life. The second is for the Torah's purpose. But he says that's not at the level of binding God to the Torah. That's what he's saying. That's the interesting thing here. So the second level is what? That they bind themselves to the Torah in order to bring godliness into the Torah.
Him and his knowledge are one.
No. It's not to bring godliness into the Torah. It's to bring godliness into them that's higher than the letters of the Torah. Letters of the Torah, and they come down, and then they come to the Chachma of the Torah. What I'm questioning is in these two bonds, is the first one doing it for your interest, and the second one bringing God into the Torah is the connection of Torah to godliness? Or is there also one, when you bind yourself to the Torah, there's also two dimensions, which he clearly is saying here. There are two dimensions. You understand what I'm asking? The two dimensions, which means there's you connecting to the Torah for your purpose, fine. Then there's you connecting to the Torah, and that brings higher than the letters. Because there's the yearning that comes. So there's the yearning that comes. Since there's the yearning that comes from coming down below, so that adds a chiddush in the Torah. I think there's a connection between the second and the third, basically. In other words, when a soul comes down below, so number one, through its new passion, the passion that it develops, it gets something higher, kala, more than a chesi, like the love of a spouse, or opposed to the love of a sibling. It's more passionate. Okay, and that also creates a passion. When you learn Torah, you learn with more passion, so you get higher than just the Esis HaTorah. You get all the way to Chachma Torah, to Er Chadash and Torah. And then there's the aspect where the neshamas do for Torah. They bring Elokus into Torah. That seems very similar to the second aspect of what Torah does for neshamas do for Torah. It's a little confusing, but I think that's the part here. So the lishma of how we learn Torah is what makes Elokus being revealed in Torah. That's what it looks like. It's just that there's a focus, whether it's lishma, meaning you're learning and you're drawing down the Elokus into yeah. Okay, that's fine. It really comes down to what it's doing for the neshama or what it's doing for Torah. Whether it's doing for the neshama, even though that's not your core, that's not your reason, it's still doing something for you. It's bringing down this Er Chadash. That's the point. So there's learning Torah because your intention is to gain something for yourself. That's the first level. Then you're learning Torah down below in order to bring Elokus into it. And that also does something for you, but that's not your intention. And then there's what it does for Torah, that it actually does bring sound. Okay. Follows? Yeah.
The level of learning Torah in order to know what to do, the basic thing about knowing how to do the mitzvahs.
It doesn't really discuss that. That is... We're going to learn about it. That's nigla. That's chetzenish HaTorah. That we're going to learn more about that, what that means. That could also be done two ways. You can learn because you want to know what God wants, or you can learn what it does for you. But technically speaking, that's just you're learning to know what. It doesn't tell you much about your kavanah. It's just learning what to do. It's telling you what to do. He's talking more the kavanah. Why do you want to know what to do? In order to gain something from it, or because you want to fulfill God's will. So I think we're going to learn more about this. Amnam tzarech. Should we learn further? What time is it?
11.
Okay, we'll learn something in this chapter. Amnam tzarech lahavin. However, now. However, it's a qualification. We have to understand. The general idea that was discussed before chapter 175. We learned was in 175. We learned that iskashrus, as we just said, is only possible with two separate things. Like oir and moir, you can't say they're one entity; they're bound to each other. So you can't say you have to bind them. You don't tie light to its source. You say something is being tied to something. Something's bound to something. Tied is the right word. It means two separate things. The Kamoi Hada Raisa, Mishkashra B'Kutshabrichu, like this example of Torah, like this of Torah that we're talking, that it binds itself, that it's bound into God, into God. Zeu Kamoi Dover Hanivdul Shem Mishkashra. That's like a separate thing that gets bound. Here's the question. Doesn't it say in Zohar in many places that Torah and godliness are all one? Intention of this is not one like two things that are bound, that they're mamish one. That's the point in the Zohar. So what are you saying about Torah that is like a separate thing? He's asking in a little way what you asked, but earlier what he said earlier was that Torah, as it comes down, is the Medrash says, Nevlis Chacham Shel Ma'ala Torah. The leaves of wisdom above, like when they fall, they're Torah. So that means Torah is a lower level than what it is in the source. And he explained, because God is Chakim v'lei b'chacham yediyah. God is wise, but not with conscious wisdom. Torah is wisdom. So Torah could be perceived as separate from. But here he obviously is going deeper now. He's saying, so why do we say that it has to be bound? Torah is one with God. Now we'll see the answer, but he's not contradicting obviously, but he's asking a question on what he said before. Like it says in Tanya chapter 23. The difference between Torah and mitzvahs. The mitzvahs nikra evarim. Mitzvahs are called organs, limbs. They're like the limbs of the body. What are the limbs of the body? Let's say the arms and the legs. They're a separate thing from the body. They're like the branches of a tree. Even though the soul and the body literally unite, to the point you can't separate between them. Can you separate? Actually, I should correct myself. Evrim, he does not mean like limbs of the body. He means here limbs as compared to the soul. Mitzvahs are like the body, the skeleton, the body compared to the soul. So even though the body and soul are one, like when you look at yourself as a human being, can you distinguish where soul begins and body begins? Where soul begins and soul ends? It's all integrated. There's not one. You can't say my soul only till the tip of my finger. Your soul is completely, like a hand in a glove, completely joined, fused with your body. That's what he's saying. So even though they're complete, to the point you can't separate between them, nevertheless, the guf, the body, is separate from the soul. Like we see upon death, God forbid, you see they separate. However, when they unite in a total fusion. Like for example, you could have two things, like say a garment. My jacket does not unite with my soul. I can take off this jacket. But the body is what they call a levush hamechuber. It completely joins. But you can't say it's one with. The body and soul are not the same entity. They come from their very separate entities. Which means they're two separate things that unite. So there, yes, you can say that in your viskashus. Same thing with the mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are like evarim. Shenikre evarim de malka. Mitzvahs are called evarim de malka. They're called the king's body or the king's limbs. They're like a union of two separate things. This is the Tanya Perek of Gimel. Still see that. Now he goes with the parentheses. How long is this parentheses? Oh, one line. What's it? Why is this the case? Because mitzvahs in general are kelim, are containers. Like it says, ner mitzvah. What's the lashon? Ner mitzvah v'teira er. A ner refers to the vessel. Mitzvah is like a ner. What's the difference when we say ner mitzvah v'teira er? A mitzvah is like your candle, and teira is your light. The candle is the wick. Is the wax, is the oil. That's what ner means. Because you see clearly, ner mitzvah, the mitzvah is like a ner, and the Torah is Mashenk and Torah, he says in Tanya there, Chad mamish. Torah is one mamish. Torah is not like a body to a soul. A Torah is the soul to the soul. It's one mamish. Or like a soul to its source. So based on this, the question becomes strong. Why did you call it hiskashrus? It's a matter of hiskashrus of two separate things, when in truth it's really one. And it's explained elsewhere, the difference between you and garmui. Garmui literally means bones, by the way, atzomas. But we learned earlier that there's two interpretations. The Arizal teaches garmuhi is midis, and chayuhi is meichen. The Alter Rebbe, Kedesh, interprets garmui or kalim, and chayu are energies. Literally, iyu means you and your you could say you and your skeleton, you and your limbs are one. And you and your energies are one. Chayu like life, you're in your energy force.
That's Alter Rebbe.
No, that's the Zohar. That's the Tikkun Zohar, we say this.
That's all you said.
No, I interpret what Garmui and Chayu mean. The expression is you and your body are one, you and your soul are one, basically. You and your limbs are one, or body are one, and you and your energy is one. So he says, now this is the difference between Torah and mitzvahs. Tayichud b'mitzvahs ub'chinas ir v'garmui. This seems more appropriate to the Alter Rebbe's taich. Garmui being like similar to the Evarim, to body. Garmui literally means bones. But we don't mean bones literally, we mean here. So he says, mitzvahs is ir v'garmui. That's you and your so-called body. This is like two things that become united. This is not a core essential unity. It's two things that you get united. Like the body and soul, so to speak. And the yichud, the unity in Torah, is like him and his energy, or his life force. It's not Keli and Gemui Yichu is the Kalim are connected with him. Here the energy is connected with its source. Remember we spoke is Dveikus, not Kashrus. Because energy, let's say sunlight. Sunlight, even if it comes to earth, it has an intrinsic unity with the sun. It's not like, let's say I give you a cup of water or transmit something that is of substance. So then the water, maybe you connect it to a river, but now it's not. Just as an example. So air, as it's connected to its source, is a yichud. It's not mahusachar. It's not a separate entity. When air goes back to its source, it's not like two separate things. And the unity is a yichud atzmi. So he says two things, that it's of the same personality, and the unity is therefore a core unity. Whereas by Garmui, it's not a same personality. It's unified, but it's not the same personality. So just for the record, personality here means that it reflects the divine. Kalim, the body, you can unite it with the soul, but you're not going to say the body is a reflection of the divine quite the same way, even though it was created with B'Tselem Elokim and our bodies are created commensurate to the Neshama and so on. Like we learned before that chapter, it means chapter 175, that the connection of Eir Moir, light and its source, and its luminary, is a form of Dveikus. Total cleaving, total union. It's not like a knot that ties two things together. Atzmis. Same thing, in Torah the yichud is a yichud atzmi, it's a core unit. That's the union what we just mentioned from Zayar, that Torah and God are one. Mamish, literally. So here's the question. So how do we say the Lashon Miskasharon? How does the same Zayar say expression binding? How could you say the word binding in Torah, which implies a connection, a bind of something that's separate? I'm basically going to explain how Torah, there's both elements, obviously, but he's spelling out the question very, very directly. So how could you say it's kashrus and Torah? Okay? Good. I'm sorry. Well, l'chera, seemingly, apparently, we can say, maybe this is apparent. Seemingly the difference in outer dimension of Torah and inner Torah. The outer dimension of Torah is letters of Torah alone. It's like you look at the letters of a book, lahavdil. So you see letters. You don't yet appreciate the content of the letters. Because what's revealed to us in Torah are only the letters. Both in the written Torah, what was revealed are only the letters, like we learned earlier. Mashenkin and Nakud is the punctuation, what is the vowels. And Tagin, there's crowns. You know, the little things you make the mark, what do they call them, crowns? The Kolshken HaTaimim, and surely the song, the Taimim, the trup, the tune, or the reasons, it could also mean time means the reasons, but it means that we learned earlier, if you remember, that there's 4 dimensions in Torah. There's Taimim, Nekudis, Tag, and Esis. Rosh Tevis, Tansa. So Esis are letters. Like you look in a Sefer Torah, you see letters. You don't know how to read them unless you're taught. So the Taimim and the punctuation and the Tagin, even though he did bring that Rabbi Akiva, the Deirish, you could learn things from the Tagin, but you don't understand in a revealed way the messages in each of those crowns.
What was the fourth one? Timing.
It goes Oisius. The Koshke Tamlin is Galu Achshav. We're not revealed today. In parentheses, yes, we is Galu La'osid will be revealed in the future. Zayin Time Teira. This is the reasons of Torah. This is the pleasure and the delights in Torah that we learned earlier is only in God's domain. And what was revealed today, now, our present, are only the letters of the Torah.
But we have Tagin now. We have time.
Maybe you don't know what it means. It's not revealed. It's just there.
So we mean the meaning of it.
Yeah. This is what was given to us at Mount Sinai and Mount Torah. Heina is the Torah. Heina is the Torah. Are the letters of the Torah. Let me just stop a moment and say, if you remember, he asked the question earlier. Since it's Shashrim Lefan of the Torah, it's his delights. Why was David punished? It's beyond us. It wasn't revealed to us. What's revealed to us, David focused on what was revealed to us. So he said that's where he brought the whole story with the mitzvahs. That the truth is, even that which is the divine delight should also affect us. That was what he said back then. Let me just see a second, because I want to just make sure the flow is going here. Well, 1 second. Yeah, the matana of Torah. That even the matana has to come through a bittul. Okay, fine. But the bottom line is, he's trying to answer that when you say his kashus, you're talking about the outer dimension of Torah, the letters. That's what he's up to now. Now he's asking a question within this. And even though by Matan Torah everything was given, also the crowns and the Nekudis were given then. And it is also today, we also have revelations from those levels. And also in the future, when there'll be the revelation of the taimi, the sound, the music, so-called, the melodies and the inner reasons of Torah, there's not going to be another Matan Torah. We're not going to have another Sinai. Because everything was already given by Mount Torah. So in other words, he's asking a question on his statement. Nevertheless, what was given in a revealed way, and to everyone, 2 things he says, revealed and to everyone, those are the letters. The Mashateri Shayach to Kol Echad Yisrael, because when we say that Torah is related, has a relationship with every one of Israel, has a Esis the Torah. That's the letters of the Torah. Not everyone has access to the other. Esis, everyone has access to. Even if you don't know what it means, you can still say the letters. You can just read them or repeat them. That's why everybody makes the blessing Neis Torah, the giver of the Torah. Gam ha'amiratzim, even the amiratzim, meaning the people of the land, the earthy people, literally means the ignorant people. Shein lem shum yediyah, that have no knowledge. Gam ba'achachma the Torah, hamlubeshes ba'esis. They have no knowledge, even in the wisdom, also in the wisdom of the Torah that is manifest in the letters. The kolskim b'madregas el yen is the Torah, and definitely they have no knowledge of the other 3 higher levels. And nevertheless, they also make the blessing Neis Torah, al Eis is the Torah. on the letters of the Torah. Shazel mashenit l'kol echad echad Yisrael, because that what was given to every individual, l'kulam b'shava, everybody equally. But he also said revealed. So both what was revealed and to everyone. Because you could say that even Tamaratzim, to everyone was also given the other, but that not in a revealed way. Or you could say it's not revealed, but not to everybody. It's revealed, but not to everybody. So he says no, it's not revealed and not to everyone. Okay, very good proof, yeah. The Shalah says, for example, when a person can't learn, they could even say the names of the Mesechtas, like saying Brachas, Baba Metzia, just say the names, or the names of the Parshas. That's already considered something. So you can just say letters. So we see from this that Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah, is primarily the letters. But he means here that primarily the letters that are given, the Torah Shebiksav as it's given to us. And that's why it's called Torah Shebiksav, Ksav, the written letters. And now he goes on, because remember he said, Hein b'Torah Shebiksav, he started. V'chein, Mashabom b'Torah Shebiksav b'Torah Shebal Peh. And also that which comes from the written Torah. To the oral Torah, Hariyakol Rakma Esis HaTorah. Everything is from the letters of the Torah. Like we learned before, chapter 173. Yeah. Because remember he said there that everything comes from there, and that Rabbi Akiva, who learned from every kotz, from every from every point. That was unique. Good. V'gam, and now he's adding something. Additionally, v'gam, and also shekol in yoni hatera. Hakolu ba'alochas hamedabrim bin yoni magashmim. All the matters of Torah are all about laws that speak about physical things. Like if you exchange a cow for a donkey. Or two people who are grasping a garment. Or the laws of fooling somebody, of cheating someone. Lying, or how do you say no? Yeah, no is for him. Of fraud, deception. Ukahai Gavna, and similarly. He's going here, from level to level. First he's Hamachle Parah B'Chamer, okay, that's physical. He's going even to not just physical, but actually deception. Doesn't get more matter than that. Shakol Medaber, why I use these three examples? Hamachle Parah B'Chamer is physical. Shnei and Betalis is already a garment, not just an animal. And then they know is really okay. Shakol Medaber B'Inyanim Gashmin. They all speaks about physical things. Shein Dvarim Nivdalim V'Nefradim Betzim. That are fundamentally separate and nifradim and divided. Nivdalim means separate. Nifradim means nivdal is separate. Nifrad is like cut off, severed. Be'etzem fundamentally, meaning from godliness. This is his answer, his ostensible answer. But also the chachma, the wisdom in Torah that manifests in these ideas, has a mislabish bedavar hanifrad. It's manifesting in a separate thing. That's both detached and also separate. That's why you could say it's kashrus. That's what he's leading to.
But how could you say be'etzem, these are things of nivdal and nifrad be'etzem? We know that everything is ultimately makosher to the etzem of God. Everything is etzem. Even the hamor and all this of kashmir, no such thing as being nivdal. How would you say that?
Why do you say that?
Nivdalim, nifradim, be'etzem, can there anything be nifradim, nivdalim, be'etzem from Hashem? Everything is ultimately connected to the etzem of Hashem.
So why does the Zohar say Torah v'kutshabricha kul echad? Say everything is kul echad.
Okay, but so there's different madrigas.
So only Torah is just a level compared to that table. The Zohar is not just saying it's a level; it's clearly a different dimension. The difference is everything is a creature of God's. Everything's created by God, but not everything is godly. Godly meaning reflecting godliness. It has divine energy that's been sustaining it,
Right.
but it's not reflective of godly personality. Torah is the divine personality, divine wisdom, divine will.
Right, how it reveals itself, but
A table is not in any way reflective of God's personality. It's a creature.
God fills all space, everything, the table, the chamor, everything.
So how do you see the difference between Torah and a table?
How it reveals itself.
So it's just revelation. So in other words, this is really a Torah just concealed.
This is just godliness. This is aspects.
So you think
God,
this is
essence of God. I didn't say Torah.
so Mashiach comes? Will we stand up when a table is brought into a room?
We'll stand up and it's a different revelation.
Why not? It's
But
God.
Just like the
We'll see
water,
Yoshi.
the Malay art, there's Hashem.
I'm saying, I want to know how you understand it.
Everything is going to be.
So I'm saying, Mashiach will be here, godliness will be revealed in everything. Will we stand up for a Sefer Torah and not for a table? Why? Think about it. Remember, you see, you learned in classes that the Shaykh of Amunah, that God sustains everything. So you feel that everything is godly. It doesn't say everything is godly. It doesn't say anywhere such a thing. If that's the case, then why not do Averis? It's just revealed godliness. Just reveal godliness in a bad place. What's wrong? Why can't you go to the worst places and find the God in them? What do you think? If it's just hidden. Because it's not, there's a difference between we say God is everything, but not everything is God. Right? We say God is nature, but not nature is God. Pantheism. Spinoza said that. Which means that everything in existence cannot exist without God and is only really divine energy. But it's not divine. It's a big difference, divine energy and divine. Which means Torah is divine. Is the divine manifest in wisdom, in will. When you do a mitzvah, you're doing a divine act. When you're eating a meal, you're not doing a divine act. You're doing what God mandated you to do in this world. Because you have to eat. Now you eat properly, you're elevating your physical act and making it a mitzvah. See, I'm trying to explain the difference between a mitzvah and a regular walking down the street. It's not the same thing. To know God in all your ways, but that's not a mitzvah. A mitzvah means when you do a mitzvah, you're actually doing a divine act. God said, this act is my divine act. When you're eating, that's not a divine act. You don't see the difference between that and eating? Okay, then we need to go through Alaves. This is like basic.
Because it's tzaddik, a complete tzaddik gamor, al pitanya, every single thing.
He has more than.
He's walking down Eastern Park.
Does he have?
Every single moment.
Does a tzaddik?
Action,
1 second. Are you playing devil's advocate, or you really don't understand?
I'm not a devil.
No, you're playing just.
I'm Jewish.
So are you saying a tzaddik has more than 613 mitzvahs?
No.
Why not?
I just say that when
everything he does. Why doesn't he have more than 600? I asked you a question. Answer my question now. Why does he have then not only 613 mitzvahs? Then everything is a mitzvah.
Because one of the mitzvahs of the 613 is everything you do is
That's your answer?
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. Okay, it's not for now. This is really. You really don't understand this at all? You never had an answer to this? No one ever told you this? So what you're asking right now, this basic question. You know, the difference between a Sefer Torah and a stone. The difference between a mitzvah and walking down the street l'shem shamayim. Do you know any? Have you ever? Is there a difference between Yom Kippur and the day after Yom Kippur? In your mind?
Yes.
You know that on Yom Kippur you do something, you could be chayiv misa, and you do it the next day you're not. Life and death. Is that just giluyim by you? It's all God. So what's the difference in Yom Kippur and not Yom Kippur? Why can't you go into Kodesh Kodashim all the time?
You're saying that each day and each deed has a different essence to it, right?
I'm not saying you have. I'm not saying you have Havana, but it's a good question that he's asking. I just want to know how far have you gotten thinking about it. Maybe you haven't thought about it. Maybe you just, you learn. I have no problem. I didn't say it's not a good question. I just want to know what you know, and because I'm not going to. If I have to start from scratch, I have no problem with that. But I want to know if there's anything that you guys would say about this. There's olive-based questions, but trust me, Most people have no answer, don't really know the answer to these questions. You eat Truma Meiser here in Israel, it's a mitzvah. You go 1 inch out of Israel, you're chayiv misa. This is not a matter of diluyim here. It's life and death. Inches. Seconds. So I'm asking how you understand that in the context of everything being God. And look, the biggest problem was with Shabtai Tzvi and Jacob Frank was they said, they learned Kabbalah, Kabbalah. They said, God is everywhere. Okay, I can't go some places because it's dangerous. You know what? I'll go with the right kavanah. I'll go there. I'm going to find God everywhere. I'll elevate the deepest sparks in the darkest places. Orgies, every davar usr, everything not permitted. So what you're saying is not a small matter. If you carry this all the way, then everything is God. It's just a matter how concealed it is. So let's reveal it all. And yet there are guidelines in Torah that are very black and white and do not allow for everything. And there are limits. And even a tzaddik, yes, I would not say a tzaddik walking down the street, no matter how big a tzaddik, is the same as him putting on film. It's a different mitzvah. You can't say that. That he's divine, that he's aware of God all the time, yeah, but film does something for him that walking down the street doesn't, or else you're saying that he doesn't have to put on film. Why doesn't he just find God in the street? You're not going to say that, right? A tzaddik is mechuyev in mitzvahs. And Yom Kippur, yes, for him Yom Kippur does more than it does for us, because all year round he's on a higher level. Fine. But what you're really asking is, how do you understand the context of a diverse levels of kedusha and chayil? We say hamavdul ben kodesh lachayil, intermarriage. And what? A non-Jew is not created by God? Is he less God? I mean, so it's not, we're talking about right. So the question is, how do you understand these fundamental distinctions in the context that there's one God everywhere? It's a good question. I'm not denying it. It's really not the context here, and I'm more than happy to discuss it, but I'd rather focus on that in a certain moment, because it's not a 5-minute discussion.
But isn't it basically the same question as
You see here, no, that's not the same question. Here, because here it's a given that Torah is one with divine and the table is not. The question here is, how could you call Torah his kashrus? Here's the other way around. Torah is one. So he's saying maybe you could answer, because when the Torah manifests in the world in letters and in physical things, that's where the Torah becomes so-called a davar nivdal, because it's addressing a davar nivdal. His question, the question is, nothing is a davar, but here it's a given that the world is not Torah. The key thing you have to just remember, just to make things a little simple, even though it's not an adequate explanation, is a creature of God's does not mean it's divine. You can build a machine that's not in your image. You build the machine. It's still the divine force that keeps it alive, and it's definitely reflective of the divine will and all that. But then God took a human being and said, the human I create in my image. What does that mean? Why is the sun and moon not in God's image? What about the animals? What about the vegetation? That's also, who put it there? It's not the image of someone else, but he doesn't call it Tselem Elokim. So the bottom line is that God infused some creatures with a personality of the divine. Whatever that means, personality. But something of the divine that reflects the divine, not just is an expression of the divine. That's the key thing. So when you say, let's say, Eiris and Kalim, Eir is a reflection of God's expression. A Keli is God's will. You have a Keli, let's say a cup. I need a cup to drink water out. So I created a cup. The water, I'm saying water is not a good example, no. You're a teacher. You're teaching an idea to the student. The idea is what you want to convey. The examples you use are Kalim. You're not going to say the example is the idea. Is the idea manifest in garments? That's what he said before. Remember he said a body and a soul. A body unites with a soul, but it's not the soul. Eir is the moyer. The Eir, when it goes back to its moyer, it's one, because Eir is just expression of the moyer. So that's the example Chassidus uses. Torah is like Eir from the moyer. A table is not Eir. Table is an entity that God created in a separate way. Does it have divine? Of course it has divine, but he created it intentionally in a way that does not express him. That's why it doesn't have Kedusha. And that's why it will never have Kedusha. Even when Mashiach comes, a Torah will always be the Eir Elokus, Torah Eir, Neir Mitzvah v'Torah Eir. It will be God's so-called reflection of God's wisdom. The world will be a reflection of God's will. That's what he wants. This is the so-called platform that he wants. But the platform is not necessarily one with God's expression.
don't we say that in the later stages, the Geula, that the human body, Mibas, what is it? Mibas XLP.
I'm sorry, Exal Kai, saying Neshama is Zaynis Min Haguf.
From our body itself, Gomehu, the Kalim, will experience godliness like an expression of godliness that is only experienced now, like Iu V'Chayehu, will also have that level in Gomehu.
And Chassidus asked this, and Chayoy will be higher than Gamor. Even then, they will have something over it. Each one has a quality. I didn't say there isn't a quality in the Yesh. The Yesh teaches us about Atzmus, but the teaches us about the revealed God. Remember, there's two separate things. There's learning about the Etzem, and there's learning about the personality. Look, a newborn child may be connected to God more than you and I ever will be. But there's no consciousness involved. What we're learning is consciousness. You also want a revealed divine consciousness. And then you want to have both. You want to have a union of the two. The higher worlds express they're divine expressions, they're divine revelation. The lowest world reveals the Atzem, but not in a revealed way. There's no revelation. It's just an expression of that level. And you need to join the two, Gilui and Yesh, Eir and Yesh. Let's put it this way, Eir is not just revealed Yesh. It's not that the physical world is just hidden Eir. The physical world has its own, it has a body that God created. It has a reflection of God's infinite power that's beyond Eir. But Eir always remains the way godliness is expressed in a way that we can hold on to. There's many sikhs in Mrs. Mamorim about this. Yeah. So basically saying, so it's begam ken b'chinas nivdal. So remember, a donkey and a cow and deception is not, we call that nivdal from Elikus. That you understand? When you deceive somebody, that's not godliness. Deception, I know that he brought, is as far away from God as possible. You're lying.
But we say that like Paro, you can't get worse than Paro in the world, but then we say that the ultimate source of Paro is Nifroin Kal.
The
ultimate level of the highest levels of godliness.
But do you go into Shalosh Klipos Atmeis to elevate them to the highest level? Why? Because that's what they're intended to be, is to stay there, not for you to enter there. Shvirosan, you know the expression that the only way to redeem them is to break them?
But ultimately, if you want to, the times of the Geula,
I just asked you, so what's your defense if someone says, so orgies and I can do every davar asa to find the God in there? Why not? It just bothers you. I know it repulses you. Me too. But why? What's your logic?
By not doing it, you find the God.
Yeah, because ultimately, when all you were defining as divinity, something can be divine, but not divine, but not God. What was it? Your line, divinity.
I say it could be God, the energy, but not divine.
But ultimately, what we say is that
when someone acts nobly and charitably, they're acting divinely. Right. When they're acting obnoxiously, they're not divine. As simple as that. Not because it's hidden divine. It's just not divine. That's not what. That's it. They have to not behave that way. There's no way to redeem that except stopping to do it. You can't be obnoxious and say that's divine. It's not the way it is. God created a world where there are rules. This is divine. This is not. What Hitler did and the Nazis is not divine, to put it mildly.
It's divine. I would define as what God's ultimate intention and kavana is in this world, and being bad.
So in Tanya, by the way, hold on. You know what he says in Tanya? What he says, kedusha is anything that's bottled to Hashem, and klipa is what's not bottled. Fine, I have no problem with that.
Right.
That's it. So then davar nifrod means something that's not bottled. So be it.
Not bottled.
Good. That helps you. Fine with me.
Not aligned with the intention of God.
Well, not aligned and not bottled. The same. Yeah. That's fine. That helps.
Yes.
Great.
But I want to get back to the thing about the Kalim. Ultimately, don't we say that ultimately, since Kalim have fallen lower, they're coming from Yesh Miyayin, not Hishdalshalus, or ultimately is Hishdalshal, but Gashmius is Nifrad in the sense that it's from Yesh Miyayin. And therefore,
And they never heard the other side of things, that there's also a Mila in
when we say
the other side?
Gula, that actually the higher level.
You said it, yeah. But you've never heard the other side too, that Kedusha has Mila over Choil. You're talking about the quality of the Kalim.
Right.
There's also advantages the Eir have over the Kalim. They have other advantages, not that advantage. So there'll be the joining of both advantages. That's the thing. Torah has a quality over mitzvahs. Torah and Tshuva. Tshuva has milas that Torah doesn't have, and Torah has milas Tshuva doesn't have. What's wrong with saying they'll be both? And each will teach each other. They'll inform it. Tzadika, also lavasad. Tzadikai b'tiyufta. Tzadik will have Tshuva. The Eiris will have the quality of the Kalim. The Kalim will have the quality of the Eiris. That's the ultimate. So it's correct what you're saying, but it's not everything just one and everything just each has a different. Remember, we live in a world. God forgot everything is one. For us, there is a distinction between Eir and Keli, and that has to always be respected, because God created this diverse world. And remember, even when Mashiach comes, it's not a retirement village. You're constantly climbing higher and higher. What was yesterday a Keli will be tomorrow's Eir.
But the distinctions are going to be less and less, because there's going to come a time, the ultimate level of Geula, that there will be no death, no injury, we won't have to eat, the body will always be...
But maybe there'll be new types of distinctions you can't even imagine. But maybe... Hold on.
Our bodies are going to be less and less.
1 second, who says? But maybe there'll be new distinctions you can't imagine today. God is full of surprises. You think you have it all figured out? You're dealing with the world of good and evil, but then there's good and better and excellent, and even better than excellent, things that are so beyond we don't even know yet. An exciting future ahead of you, don't worry about it.
The Rambam or the Ramban. One says that in the goof, and one says, I don't know which one said what. I forgot.
Ramban said in a goof, and that's how he finds it.
It's not like you come to the top of the mountain and it's over with. Then begin new mountains.
There ain't no mountain high.
Okay, let me just finish here. So b'chinas nivdal. Rak she'ena kamei hamitzvah sheboim b'chinas islapshus mamish b'dover hagashmi. But he starts to qualify. But still, it's not like mitzvahs. Because mitzvahs, they come mamish, they literally come manifest in a physical thing. Kamei b'tzitzus hagashmi, like in physical tzitzus. Or b'klaf hagashmi, or physical parchment. Because by mitzvahs, the physical thing itself becomes mamish, literally a container for the divine supernal will. Like he writes in Tanya, like he says in Tanya chapter 23, what he brought earlier. That the life, the force, the vitality of mitzvahs, that it becomes literally like a body to a soul, like we learned before, like a body to a soul. And look what it says in the Geras Kedesh Kunta Zachen, and the epistle that begins to understand what it says in Priyatz Chaim. He gives example, like there he says, like for example, an esrig, and minov, and its species, and the species. Hilbish, meaning the other species, the other three, the minim, dal minim. Hilbish ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mehusan. God literally manifested in them from Mehusan, from their actual personality of the divine. Hilbish ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mehusan. I have to look inside what it means Mehusan. No, because it's a keli. Exactly, it's a keli for Elokus. That's the key. He's distinguishing mitzvahs now and Torah.
So is the Sefer Torah, no? The keli to Elokus.
No, Sefer Torah is not just a keli of Elokus. Torah is chad. That's the point. It's chad. That's what he's saying here. Here he's qualifying that. Now he wants to say, he's trying to explain that Chetzenis Torah does come down, and that's why he can say nifrit. He's only saying it's not like mitzvahs. Mitzvahs literally, Torah does not become a physical thing. I'm not talking about the Sefer Torah now, but the Torah talks about physical things. So he's saying, but when it talks about it, you can say maybe that makes it apart from, because it's dealing with deception. That's why you need to connect it back. He said l'cheri yesh lemer. We're still in the middle of a l'cheri yesh lemer, because his question is what's his kashrus in Torah? That we still don't know. He's in the middle of the discussion. So now he said mitzvahs, it's not. Mitzvahs literally memuhusan. I think Hilbash HaKadosh Baruch Hu memuhusan means that literally the physical mitzvah, the mesrig, is, in its physical personality, is God put into it His desire. Well, and send in parentheses.
Stand up for somebody doing a mitzvah. There isn't much this.
The person who does it, but not the esrog itself. Because it's a keli, that's why. It's not You stand up for not for kelim. A Talmud Chacham, let's say. You stand up for. What? What? What's the difference? I'm saying you don't stand up. Since when do you stand up for esrog? Or for tzitzis?
But you stand up for.
I never heard that. You could do that. That's nice. I don't know. For a Talmud Chacham, it's a din. Someone did a mitzvah, you stand up for him? Not necessarily.
What about
someone did a...
in a room?
I don't know. Not necessarily. What?
Say you had. I walked into this room right now. I'm sitting down. Somebody put down the Torah. I turned around and see a Torah down. I don't stand up for it.
I'm not talking about a Torah. He's talking about a person who does a mitzvah. That's what he's asking.
But you say you don't.
Sefer Torah, yeah.
Torah is a keli.
Torah is not. Torah is That's why.
Keli, the clock.
That's because it's the Torah. It's the manifestation of Torah. Like you stand up for a Talmud Chacham. It's not the body. You're standing up for the wisdom in it. It's not for the scroll. It's for the wisdom in it. It's the God's Torah. Gemara is Beit Torah Shabbat Peh. That's why it doesn't have the same Kedusha. What's the question exactly? Are we being like nitpicking, splitting hairs?
We're not trying to pick hairs.
What are you trying to? Is the Ayin Beis not understood? If the Ayin Beis is not understood, I'll answer it. Is there a question on Ayin Beis here? I'm trying to explain the Ayin Beis right now. He's saying that why is it called iskashus when Torah is one as opposed to mitzvahs? So he says ostensibly yashleim l'chayr. You could say maybe because the Torah manifests the chitzenius in letters and in the physical things. So perhaps
in a discussion of physical things.
Yes, in discussion of physical things, and that's why he says also the chokhmah that's involved in the physical things would be a separate. Not like a mitzvah, which is actually a physical thing.
Right.
Torah is still the wisdom in it.
Right.
That's what we're up to right now.
You're only saying dveikus on Torah, not iskashus.
That's his question, but he's answering now.
Okay.
He's answering by saying that maybe it is because of the chitzenius at Torah. Okay. Lefisha.
Where's the Elokus? The Elokus is in the discussion.
There is no Elokus in physical objects. There's a divine energy and force spark in it. That's it.
Yeah. So it's the conceptual.
What's your question?
Let me just
I just tell you, there's divine acts and there's non-divine. There's things that are divine. Esrog, for example, on Sukkot, when you do the mitzvah esrog, is not like a lemon. It's not a lemon. I don't know what he says here. He just said it. It's not a lemon.
So when you're discussing Torah, like we're doing here, where's the other clues? In the discussion? In the deeper?
What do you mean?
Now we're talking Torah. So
the Torah talks, let's say, laws of deception. So Torah is telling you God's will, what He wants you to do about the laws of deception, or machlif parah b'chamer. It's dealing with physical matters and telling us what God wants us. He says chachma. He says chachma. The words that here he says here. Because chachma the Torah mislabish b'zeh. As a mislabish b'davar hanifrid.
The thought to speech.
I don't know what you mean by thought and speech, but fine.
Thought to speech. Now you're talking Torah. You're speaking Torah. You're talking Torah.
Mm-hmm.
He's mamish is lavish in Torah, wisdom of Torah. So now the thought speech is in your mind. That is mamish chachma. Elokus.
I don't know. That's what he's saying here.
Okay, so that's what we think he's saying.
He's saying the opposite. That since the Torah manifests in physical things, so therefore you could say it's nifrid, it's nivdal, that needs to be bound back to godliness because it's being related to things that are separate from the divine. That's it. Mitzvahs, on the other hand, are actually manifest in the Gashmis. I see this is a whole piece here now about mitzvahs. 1 second, let me just see something. So right now, he's not going to go back to this subject so fast, so you have to hold cup. He now went into a long discussion now distinguishing mitzvahs from Torah. Okay, so he says, Lufi Mashin is Barasham in the Geras HaKodesh. Le'il, according to what it says there, Le'il, meaning earlier in that, it's Gunter Sachren. Nida Shezor B'chinis Halavnunis Shabab B'chinis Slapshus B'chitzeni Sakelim. Nira means, it appears, he's Nira, he means I feel, or Nira means, it seems, that this is referring to Lavnunis is whiteness that manifests in the outer dimension of the container. Umahuz B'chinis HaChetzenis D'chsadim Primis D'zah. And the muhus of the outer dimension of chsadim, of primis zah, yeshneim shezah, b'chinas havlunas k'may shubah, b'chinas zah. Yeshneim, this is the lavlunas that comes in the level of zah. Mislav b'maysa mitzvahs k'may ba'esrik. Manifests in the mitzvahs like in the esrik. Okay, we'll have to learn the Tanya inside to understand this. So we could either do that now, or we could skip this, and let me just read a little further, and then maybe we'll stop. I'm skipping the parentheses for now because we need to learn it inside Tanya. It's a beard in Tanya. Essentially what he's trying to say is, he's explaining in this parentheses how exactly godliness manifests in a mitzvah.
Yeah.
In other words, what is the level of, let's say, before the mitzvah? What it would be an esrog or any other object that doesn't have a mitzvah? What level does that, what kind of divine manifests in that? So he says it's the whiteness of the divine that manifests in the outer dimension of a container. When it comes to a mitzvah, it's getting it from chsadim of primis dezah, the chitzeni chsadim. In other words, it's a deeper dimension of the divine that manifests there. That's really what he's saying, than the regular objects.
When they do the mitzvah, what are you talking about now?
Things that are not mitzvahs and things that are mitzvahs.
Like the first minute of daylight, it changes from just having a consumis.
No, I don't know. Maybe, but we're talking, let's say, an esrog compared to a lemon, or an esrog compared not sukkahs, maybe. Yeah. Harinasa b'chinas klei mamish. So, bottom line is, with mitzvahs, it becomes literally a container. L'chein yesh bo gedusha b'masha huktzah l'mitzvasa. And that's why the esrog has holiness, because it was dedicated. Huktzah l'mitzvasa, it was cut off, it was picked. Huktzah. Designated. But also huktzah is by esrog, I think specifically, that you're designated. You're designated for a mitzvah. Elsewhere. So bottom line, we see from this that this mitzvahs have kedusha. Elsewhere he explains the mitzvah says based in Yonim. That the mitzvah there are two things. One, that the mitzvah is in the cosmic order of 10 spheres of Atzilus. And the second thing a mitzvah has, that's in the divine energy higher than Atzilus. Like by Tefillin, the 4 boxes are like the 4 the levels of intellect in Zah. Which means that through Tefillin you draw down intelligence into Zah, into Midas. And the second thing in Tefillin is the Ratzon Elyon, the divine desire, supernal desire that draws down from Chesed. So in other words, there's a mitzvah as it's functioning within the structure of existence. This is, by the way, back to the interface. We're talking about an Eir Pnimi. So a mitzvah, let's say, is Mamshech Moichen into Midas. And then there's an element of a mitzvah, is Mamshech from Keser, God's will, into Atzilus. It would be like when we say, Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvah Sivonu l'haniach tefillin. So Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvah Sivonu is focusing on that you sanctified us and gave us your desire. So we'll be Mamshech Keser into existence. That's from Eir HaBligvul, the transcendent energy. Remember we were talking about Eir HaBligvul, transcendent energy into existence. He's showing how even in mitzvahs you have these two dimensions. Remember I explained that we have now, in Seder Shalshos you have Eir HaBligvul, Eir HaGvul, Sevav Mamala, Esesfiris Agnuzis, and higher than that. You have Primi Yisak, Chitzeni Yisak, Atzilus, Chachmei La, Chachmei Tata. You have Moichen Midas, you have Eris Kalim. They're all the same thing. Then you have Torah, Pnimis HaTorah, Chitzenis HaTorah, Neshamas. The Neshamas as they are in Atzilus, the Neshamas as they come down, all interface. And now in mitzvahs, he's explaining. The mitzvahs as they are, we're doing it for the Shashuim Lefanov, Torah, like Torah Shashuim Lefanov, there's mitzvahs how it relates. So he's explaining how mitzvahs, it seems to be like a so-called a tangential, but it's not so tangential. He's showing how mitzvahs, there's also mitzvahs as it, Mamshik, let's say, Moichin into Midas, like he says, and then there's mitzvahs as they are higher than the 10 spheres, higher than Shtalsus. That's what he's saying here. But all this is to explain how a mitzvah is not like Torah. It's going to go back. Torah, however, is more connected, but there's also Torah that, see, everything has both sides to it. He's showing how a mitzvah has both as it relates to existence, and how a mitzvah is expression of God's desire. One second. So that's what he says here now. And this element is equal in all mitzvahs, this keser. Because Damshacha from the God's will. This is what Razal say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu maniach tefillin, she has b'zeh peis pirushim. And this is what Razal say. This all seems to be like, remember, this is all a so-called extension of qualifying that Torah, even though it's melubish and nifrid, in a separate thing, it still retains that it's Torah. While mitzvahs are literally mislabish b'davar hanifrid. This is all distinction, all to explain how Torah has its kashrus. So he's explaining how mitzvahs now have two dimensions. Are you following? That's what Marazal said God puts on film. There's two interpretations in this. That God is the level of Zoh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the level of Zoh. Zohar Ampin Midas. Maniach tefillin hamshachas hameichel l'Zoh mechub. Maniach tefillin does that mean that what? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zoh putting on film is he's drawing down meichin into Zoh, into HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, tefillin is higher than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Al b'chinas hakeser, Aleph, that's it. Al b'chinas hakeser ain't a shaykhin at tefillin. But the level of keser is not possible to fill. V'apirish habeis the HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chinas hakeser. Second interpretation is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is higher than tefillin. Umaniach tefillin, and Hamshachah Teshuv says b'chinas hameichen. That he's drawing down from keser into meichen. So in the first interpretation, tefillin is not connected to keser. Tefillin is bringing from the intelligence from mind into heart, to emotions. The second interpretation, you're bringing from keser into meichen. Yeah.
So what? How is that? So in the first.
This is all still. Wow. This is all going to be.
In the first one, where it says then, the first one where it's bringing down from seichel into midas.
I'm sorry.
First one, when God says He puts on tefillin also.
Right.
The first level is Mia is into midas.
Right.
Zah into midas.
Right.
So God, you mean, but God's doing that at that level in Atzilus, you mean?
Yeah.
And the second level, which
second interpretation.
Yes, second is Enoshading tefillin at all, meaning that God is Ein Sof.
No, you didn't listen.
What?
First, there's two interpretations. It says God puts on film. The question is who's Kudsha Baruch Hu and what level is film?
Okay.
So one explanation, Kudsha Baruch Hu goes on Zoh, Midas Zoh.
Right.
Putting on film, he's bringing down from Meichen into Zoh. So Kudsha Baruch Hu is lower, and Tefillin is Meichen. He's bringing Meichen into Zoh. Kudsha Baruch Hu maniach Tefillin. And there, in that interpretation, Tefillin has no connection to higher than Meichen. Then there's a second interpretation. Kudsha Baruch Hu is Keser, and he's putting on Tefillin. He's drawing from Rotzen, from higher than Chachma into Meichen. That's the two interpretations. According to the first interpretation, Tefillin is not connected to Keser. It's like what he said, the mitzvahs as related to the Esser spheres. Then there's the mitzvahs, Asheka D'Shanim Sivanu, is you're drawing down from the Rotzen, from God's desire, from the infinite energy into the finite. The first interpretation, you're in the finite itself, you're connecting the mind to the heart. Okay, Fine. V'zeu de b'mayim b'pasach al yob b'mashakosu keser elyon.
In the second interpretation, it's the infinite is making the connection.
Kuchabrichu is the keser, and that's being drawn down to, it's just like the infinite energy connecting with the finite.
And that's the second part is the film. Okay.
V'zeu de b'mayim b'pasach al yob. This is what we say in pasach al yob. K'mashakosu keser elyon v'iyu karkafta the film. Keser elyon is karkafta. Karkafta is the skull of the film. Yesh nuscha v'iyu karkafta the loy monach film. There's a nusach there in Pesach Al that this is the skull that never did not put on film, because it's talking about both interpretations. These are the two different nuschos. Finally, Pirush Aleph Hanal. That because why loy monach film? Because karkafta, the skull, does not put on film. It's higher than it. The tefillin hen amshachas amechem mechub al b'chinas hakeser l'maylam is that, but keser is higher than it. So that's why it doesn't apply the concept of meichen to chacham bina. The other interpretation that karkafta is keser, that's the second interpretation. So you have both interpretations fit. Umavur b'mokamacha, and it's explained elsewhere. This is the Maimer that Rebbe Rashab said in honor of the Frierdiker Rebbe's bar mitzvah. He discusses this at length. Tefillin Demara Alma Tov Reish Nun Gimel. When the Frierdiker Rebbe's bar mitzvah, the Rebbe Rashab said a long Maimer. Discusses this at length. Umavur b'mokamacha, and it's explained elsewhere. The Ba'achonas HaMitzvahs, then the preparation for mitzvahs, kamoi b'ksivas adal parshas. Like for example, when you write the 4 parshas, the 4 chapters, four portions in Tefillin, v'anachosin bebatim, and when you place them in their batim, how do you say batim? In their boxes, homes, you house them. V'asiyasan kitikunam, and you make them properly. Nimshir behem adal mechem mechub. In them is drawn the 4 levels of intelligence of Chachma Bina. Chachma Bina and Das has 2 moichin. That's what it calls usually. Chesed and Gvura of Das. By the asiyas hamitzvahs, by nochas atfilin al azrei al reish, and by doing the mitzvah, that's by preparing the mitzvah. He's explaining a new element now with mitzvahs. And by asiyas, by doing the mitzvah, by nochas, when you're actually putting on the tefillin al azrei on your arm, al reish on your head, nimshich b'marotzen elyon b'chinas hakeser. In them is drawn, transmitted the desire, the divine desire from keser b'chinas teisvus eides b'meichen, in a state of abundant additional energies in the intelligence. See what he's saying now? He's saying, we just said the 2 things in mitzvahs, another place explains, that's the difference between before, when you prepare the mitzvah and when you do the mitzvah. When you prepare the mitzvah, you're basically doing the hamshacha and the spheres. That's more the actual between Meichen and Midas. But when you are actually doing the mitzvah, you're drawing down the Ratzon Elyon. Because that's when you do it. Because the Ratzon Elyon is when you do the mitzvah. The preparation sets the tone. He's just adding. Now after this longer discussion, he says, and however you interpret it, there's a mitzvahs, physical things, they become containers of the divine. Now he goes back to Torah. All this was a long, so-called, not digression, but a type of qualification, how it's different than Torah. This explains also what he said earlier. Remember, he said earlier that mitzvahs are kelim, they're garmui. They're the ner mitzvah. So they're not one, mamish. And Torah does not come manifest in physical things. The Torah does not become the object in which you are studying. When you're studying, let's say, about an esrog, the Torah is not an esrog. So it doesn't come and manifest when he's learning the studying the halacha. By studying something, the thing itself, the Gashmis, does not become containers to godliness, and they don't gain any kedusha, holiness, because of this. When you go and pick an esrog, you designate this esrog I'm going to use for a mitzvah, you choose an esrog and designate it, you have now actually taken a physical thing and made it a keli. When you learn about an esrog, hilchos esrog, you've not done anything to change the physical esrog of this world, or do anything that in the physical has become a keli, and there's no kedusha because of it. You're learning about it. Because it's a level of wisdom. That's what he's saying. And he gives a long example here in the parentheses. I might as well end the chapter. Like he says, like for example, birurim. I mean, you understood what I just said? There is an expression, kala esik b'teiros eila, when you learn we learn the laws of Beis Hamikdash, it's like you built it. But it's still kilu. It's a Torah. Torah has a power, because Torah is God's Torah, that it's as if you. But it's still not Beis Hamikdash. You can't bring a carbon based on our learning, and you can't, just because you learn Hilchos Esrog, does not absolve you from doing the mitzvah.
But learning Torah itself is a mitzvah that we say a bracha.
Yeah, but it's a different mitzvah, but it's not a mitzvah in Gashmis. It's not
the other mitzvah that you're reading about.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But itself is an independent.
But what's the contradiction? So what? But it's not.
It's a physical mitzvah. What I'm saying, the Rebbe was trying to say here, I was thinking that...
You don't see the difference between Torah and mitzvahs? Is that what you're telling me now?
No, Torah is a mitzvah.
Tell me, is there a difference between Torah and mitzvahs? Think about it. You don't see the difference? Torah generally is study. The fact that there's a mitzvah to study, that's nice. But the mitzvah consists of studying about something, using your mind. Mitzvahs means taking physical items and doing something. Does Torah have an element? So what? So there's overlap, is what you're suggesting.
If you don't say the words when you learn Torah, physically use your lips, you don't get Makayim mitzvah.
Okay. And if you learn Tanya,
your lips are like the esrog. What I'm trying to say is the lips are like the esrog, are serving the same purpose as it. Esrog is a keli for God, and your lips are a keli for God when you're learning Torah.
and you don't have an answer for this? So look in Tanya Perek Lamed Ches. He talks about it specifically. Because words are not actions. Zut, exactly. But it's not Milsa Rabbah. You just said it. It's a minor action. And you want to change the world, you need major action. If someone just tells you with their words, I'm behind you, and they don't act on it,
Right.
I don't think you're going to like it.
But we say Talmud Torah can make it cool. So it's not such a...
So what, is everything black and white? Everything has... And that's why. So why do we need to do mitzvahs? Why do we need to do mitzvahs so Talmud Torah can make it cool?
It's a good question. The Rashbi didn't have to, because it's a high level.
But you and I have to?
The Rebbe says in the Talmud Gula...
You have an answer for everything, but you and I have to? So why not? But by us Talmud Torah is not connected to Kulam.
It is, I guess.
So why do we have to do
But
mitzvahs?
it's not on our level. I guess our level of authority, or maybe not my level. It's not on the level of Torah Sodom and Asam.
And you don't think there's any advantage to mitzvahs in this world? Because that's what you're suggesting? We should all be like Rashbi. Is that what the Torah wants?
Eventually.
The Rashbi didn't
Would you?
Rashbi didn't choose to be Rashbi.
The Rebbe says at the times of the Gula, we're all going to have to be at the level of Torah Sodom and Munasel, the level of the Rashbi.
And we won't do mitzvahs.
We'll be learning Torah all day long.
Rashbi was forced into it, don't forget. And like we're forced not to give it.
Listen, okay, I hear it this way. I don't want to be picky. Let's go. You wanted to say I'm sorry.
Anyway, it says specifically, you have your homework. Study this line this week and come back and explain why he's saying that Torah, that you don't have the physical things are becoming containers of Lakus. And there's no Kedusha because of this in the objects that you're learning about. Okay? Like in parentheses he has now, like in the Inyan of Birurim, the idea of refining, the different refinements we do. The difference between the refinement of prayer, that's in a way that you manifest in the Mizbarer, in that which needs to be refined, the animal soul. However, the refinement that comes from Torah, Rab Yehuda, Kula Tnui ben Ezekin, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda, Kula Tnui ben Nezikin. We say Rabbi Yehuda. All his learning was in the laws of Nezikin, of damages. I mean, Nezikin means the Seder Nezikin. Huh?
Torts?
No, torts is not Nezikin. Torts is not. Nezikin is damages. Ein of B'chinas Islapshus. The way Rabbi Yehuda, when he learned about Nezikin, it was not in the form of Islapshus that you manifest and you're involved in the actual things. You're learning about it. And similarly, is also the difference between Torah and mitzvahs being hislapshus in the way it manifests. Like being haberurim in haberurim shaldei mitzvahs ain't kamei b'tefillah. He's only qualifying it. So Torah mitzvah is the same thing. A mitzvah is actually taking an object of this material world and designating it and using it in the form of kedusha, and you make a bracha and you do whatever you have to do to elevate it, like tefillah. When you learn Torah about this mitzvah, you're doing it from a more detached way. You're like b'mamshech into the world about this thing. But he's qualifying that there's a distinction. Berurim, not the mitzvahs, ain't kamei b'tefillah. The berurim through mitzvahs is not like by davening. The mitzvahs gam ken abirur the er elyon b'derech mamayla lamata. Because by mitzvahs, even the birur also is in the form of the energy from above, comes from the mamayla lamata. Why? Because who put the power in a mitzvah? It's not us. God put the power into an esrog. Like it says elsewhere. Because being that it's a mitzvah from above, it's a higher energy that's higher from literal slapshus. Because the energy that manifests in actions of mitzvahs is without any concealment. Like it says in Tanya. We learned this earlier also. The neshamas get concealed in this world. Ma'aseh mitzvahs they retain. Esrog is kedusha. It's not concealed. That means it's a higher. That means that this is a higher energy. Upon him, and it comes without any concealed face. That's why the refinement in this is from above down. Because it's not like a manifestation of Seder Ishtalshalos. So Seder Ishtalshalos, the order of things is every level gets concealed. The fact that God gave us Torah mitzvahs is He bypassed the regular channels of existence. In existence, for example, there's a table, there's chairs, there's a world. This was all subject to the gradations and the hierarchy of Seder Ishtalshalos. Mitzvahs bypass that. They manifest in the physical world. So compared to Torah, they're more manifest than Torah is. So basically you have like three levels. You have the physical world. You have tefillah that elevates it from the bottom up. You have mitzvahs that manifest in the physical from above. And you have Torah that manifests from above, but not quite as much in the physical. So you have here all kinds of interactions with existence. All part of the interface. And nevertheless, mitzvahs are not like Torah that doesn't manifest at all. Because the Torah, you learn about esrog, you don't even have to ever see an esrog. You may not even know what it looks like. Rebbe once said, I remember by Fabrengen, he said, how does a little child know there's a world? Because it says, Bereshis bara Elokim. Just like, how does he know there's a cow? He never saw a cow. He learns in the Torah. When you learn in the Torah, it's talking about it, but it's not. And he's saying that even this part is still maybe the nivdal, you can say is kashas on. Aval ein ze rak b'derech makif. He's going back to before the presentation. But you can't say that the Torah is in the form of makif either. That's like completely beyond. Because it's an involvement. You're engaging. You're learning about them. So you can't say Torah is just like standing on top of a mountain or completely above. You're involved and learning about them. And being that at least it's in a form of being involved and engaging with things that are so-called separate from, what do we say, severed from the divine. So you could say this part of Torah is also nivdal, and therefore you can say it's kashrus. That's what he's saying. This ends that chapter. Let's do the summary. We said the Torah, you mekasher the Torah, you bind the Torah like two separate things. We have to understand. Doesn't it say in Zeh that Torah and God are one, and godliness are one? The mitzvahs and kelim ve'varim. Mitzvahs are containers and like organs, limbs, body, the unity there is He, you and your garmui and like your body are one. The Torah is Eir. You and your energies are one. That's mamash yichud. The eichud b'chinas is kashrus. So how can you say it's in a state of iskashus? V'yesh shleimer, and we could say before he said l'cheri yesh shleimer, the iskashus zel b'chitzeni satera. That iskashus is referring to the bind to the outer dimension of Torah, esis satera, the letters of Torah. Shezel is gala b'matan Torah. That is what was revealed at Matan Torah. And then it comes into Torah in the oral Torah. And it manifests in physical things that are separate from the divine. It's not like mitzvahs, where the physical is literally a container. That's why they have in them holiness. And the preparation to the mitzvah you draw down from the cosmic order, the structure. And the act of mitzvah is not there preparing them. You draw down, is drawn down the supernal will, desire. And that's the interpretation of Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is Zoh, puts on film the level revelation of Meichen. And the second interpretation, Regam Kadosh Baruch Hu, Keser Maniach Film, takes V'Seides B'Meichen. Second interpretation, that Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is Keser, puts on film and draws and sends and extends additional energies into intelligence, into Meichen, into the intellect. But Torah Einu B'Chinas Lapshus Mamish. Torah is not Mamish, like manifestation like mitzvahs. Or Kumei Ba'abir Ha'Hefresh Ben Torah V'Tfilah. Like the similar to the difference between the Torah, prayer and davening. Well, mitzvahs gam kem amayla lamata. Mitzvahs are distinguished from prayer because they're also from above down. However, they mamish become kelim. Nevertheless, even though the Torah is not like mitzvahs and definitely not like prayer, nevertheless it's an involvement and engaging with these so-called separate entities, meaning things that are separate from the divine. The Gama Chachma Shebezeh B'Chinas Nivdal. Means also the wisdom within it is in a state of separate because it's involved in material matters. So this seems to be the answer. They answered that this is Chetzein Said Torah is Iskashus. We're still in the middle of it, so it's far from over. So we did the beginning. We did the first chapter of Discourse 45, chapter 179. We did page 365 to the top of 368. By the way, the Frierdiker Rebbe, what does he say the summary for this discourse? Sheftim? Chitzeni Sheprimya Shebetera, the outer and inner dimension of Torah. Okay, let's stop here. Chapter 179 we did, yeah.